Good evening. Thank you everyone for being here. I'd like to call into open session this meeting of the Arlington ISD Board of Trustees on January 18th, 7:03 p.m. Thank you, full house, for everybody coming out, being with us this evening. We'll start our meeting first with an opening ceremony. I'd like to ask Mr. Hibbs to lead us in this, as tomorrow is his birthday. So happy birthday, Mr. Hibbs.
Will you all stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you very much. And now, if you would please silence cell phones, any electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And also, if you could join me in a moment of silence. We have come off of a wonderful holiday season. We've also had some situations where some very special individuals are not with us any longer, and if we could please keep those folks in our thoughts and prayers as well. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The first item on our agenda tonight under program presentation is a student performance by the district-wide MLK Elementary Choir. Ms. Johnson.
Performing for you tonight are representatives of the 17 elementary schools that participated in Monday night's youth extravaganza at Fielder Metro Center. This annual event closes out Arlington's 4-day celebration honoring the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Please note that the students are wearing this year's MLK shirt, which was designed by our first place art winner, Reem Alwan from Seguin High School. Johnny Maples, music teacher at Farrell Elementary, conducts the song by Donnelly and Strid, Martin Luther King.
Audience, before we start, I just want to say my name is Johnny Maples, and it was a true honor to direct last Monday night. We really tried our hardest to choose music that told the spirit and the story of Dr. King. Tonight we have just one song for you, and we encourage you to clap along with us when I turn around to show you that. And hey, if you want to sing with us, you're welcome to also. Take it out. Take it out.
Wonderful stuff. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Maples. Thank you, kids. That was wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Outstanding. We really appreciate you guys being here tonight. And parents, you're welcome to stay for the whole board meeting if you like.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Maples. Wonderful. Next up, we have the Student of the Month. Let's see. Oh, wait just a minute.
Good evening. As you can see, I'm not Marlene Roddy. I'm Lou Ann Kennedy, Assistant Principal at Martin High School. I'm very proud to be the Assistant Principal of our Student of the Month. Dr. Reich, Dr. Kavasas, school board members, I'm honored to introduce Martin High School's Junior Student of the Month, Abram Chu. Abram is involved in a multitude of campus and community organizations, clubs, scholastic and fine arts programs at Martin High School. As a member of the Health Occupations for Students of America, or HOSA, Abram assisted in organizing healthcare career fairs, educational outreach opportunities, and participates in a variety of HOSA competitions. He was recognized in the Texas HOSA Bowl Team competition. Abram is also a talented musician who plays the violin in our top symphony orchestra. Abram not only performed in the full orchestra last year at the TMEA convention, but also traveled this past December with the full orchestra to Chicago and performed at the world-renowned Midwest Clinic. Abram made the All-Area and Regional Orchestra and is a member of the Greater Dallas Youth Orchestra. Abram serves in the community volunteering at the Open Arms Health Clinic. He is a scribe, translator, and assists in non-emergency medical situations, shadowing medical professionals. He recently completed the City of Arlington's Youth Leadership Program. Abram attended NASA Texas High School Summer Aerospace Institute for Scholars and CAST STEM Bridge Summer Program at the University of Texas at Arlington. He is a National Merit semifinalist and an AP Scholar with Distinction awardee from the College Board. He is a national semifinalist of the USA Biology Olympia, and his team placed third at state in the Texas Math and Science Coaches Association Science State Meet. Students are not always recognized for the personal sacrifices they make to pursue their academic and enrichment studies. Abram is a prime example of a student who has given up his summers to attend enrichment opportunities, his weekends to prepare for his college readiness assessments, and his evenings for leadership training, community service, and fine arts practice and performances. Abram plans to pursue a career in the biological sciences or biomedical engineering. There's no doubt that he will make a major and meaningful contribution to our society. Congratulations once again to Abram Chu on being recognized as the district's January Student of the Month.
Mr. Chu, please come forward. You have the mic.
Thank you for this distinction.
So I would ask if there's anybody in the audience you'd like to recognize and what your plans are going forward.
My dear parents, Hi Chu and Wu Ju, and my kid brother Steven.
All right.
I had a great high school counselor, Miss Galbraith, and I had great biomedical teachers, Session Brown and Davda. Those two really helped me a lot, and yeah.
That's great. What schools are you looking at?
I got accepted to UT, but I'm waiting till March and April to hear back from the other schools I applied to.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, very impressive bio. It's incredible the example that you set for our district and for the students. You're leading by example, and no doubt that you're going to continue to make us in this district and this community proud of where you're going on from here. So that's wonderful. Do we? Yeah, we do. If you could stand there, Dr. Cavazos and myself are going to come out and come down and give you a couple of things. Maybe turn, well, we'll see. We have new technology in the room tonight, so we'll see what happens. So this is a pin that only trustees wear, and we are the only ones that have the honor and privilege of giving that to someone else that has made a great impact and is very special. So I'd like to present that to you, and congratulations. Wear that everywhere that you want to. I'm sure it'll be a common thing every day.
Congratulations. Well done. We appreciate everything you do, and you represent our students extremely well. Thank you.
Very good. And if you want to stand in between, we'll take a couple of photos. Okay, moving right along. Boy, does that sound too loud? Yes? Maybe. As I mentioned, we have new technology tonight. I'm not used to hearing myself like that. So I'm trying to not shout. So we'll make some adjustments as we move on through this evening. Next up on our agenda is the Martin Luther King celebration, the art and essay winners. Ms. Johnson, this is a great part.
As part of the MLK celebration, we are honored to recognize the winners of the art and essay contest. Students were challenged to create, write, and reflect on this year's theme, Continuing the Dream, Moving Toward Unity, Justice, and Peace. We had more than 500 students participate in the art and essay contest this year. At this time, I would like to introduce Lisa Thompson from UTA. She is the board of directors for the Arlington MLK celebration. She's the president of the board, and she will share information about our winners. Students, when your names are called, if you'll come to the front to be recognized.
Good evening, Dr. Reich. Good evening, Dr. Cavazos, and all other members of the school board. Thank you for the opportunity to present our student winners. It's been a great year. We have some dynamite students in this district. I'm just very honored every year to see all that they have accomplished through the art and the essay. You all should be very proud of each and every one of them. I would like to start with the art contest winners. Our first place winner, and the students that sang today had the t-shirts on. That was our winning art piece, and it was just phenomenal. So it's just really great. And that was created by Reem Elwan from Seguin High School. Reem is not here today, but Reem received a $1,000 scholarship.
second place art winner is Harley Hudson from Martin High School. Harley is receiving a $750 scholarship. And our third place art winner is Danielle Middleton. She's also a student at Martin High School, and she's receiving a $500 scholarship. Our essay contest winners, first place was Isaac James from Arlington High School, and Isaac is receiving a $1,000 scholarship. Second place, Andrea Villagomez from Arlington Collegiate High School, and she's receiving a $750 scholarship. She is not here today. And our third place essay contest winner is Taryn Gates. She is from Arlington High School, and she's receiving a $500 scholarship. Very, very proud of each and every one of these individuals, and we know that they are going to continue to do great things in our community and in our world, and we just want to thank you all for all that you've done for our celebration this year as we continue to advance the dream of Dr. Martin Luther King. So thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to seeing each and every one of you next year at our 2019 celebration, which will be our 30th year. Thank you.
Wow. Fantastic. Thank you, and congratulations, students. Wonderful, wonderful work. And I'll take a moment of personal privilege. The MLK committee, thank you for the amazing efforts and work. Fantastic weekend, so many events, engaging so many students and so many members of our community. So Lisa is in charge of it. I know there's a lot of responsibility, a lot of headache that goes with that preparation and planning. It was a great weekend.
Thank you.
So thank you very, very much.
I had one other recognition I'd like to make at this
Sure.
time. We also have our community award winners. These are individuals who represent our community in the areas of education, community, and government. And AISD had an award winner on Friday night, last Friday night, Michael Hill. I think he's here.
Yes.
Arlington Independent School District.
Why don't you come on down, Michael?
Yes, Sam. Congratulations on your award. If you'd like to say something, I'm sure they'd like to hear it.
Nothing like that. Again,
He loves to speak to us.
an honor and a privilege. An honor and a privilege to receive that recognition. Back up. Give him a minute. And try it again. An honor and a privilege to receive that recognition, and I appreciate the community and the committee for your efforts and for your recognition for the work that we as a school district do for the community and for our kids. And so I'm just honored and don't consider myself worthy, but I thank those who at least observed that. So much appreciated.
Thank you. Congratulations. Wonderful. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the school board recognition presentation. Ms. Johnson.
President Reich, Superintendent Cavazos, and members of the board. This month is School Board Recognition Month and a good time to honor your hard work and dedication to the children of this district. It has become tradition for the Communications Department to work with Interim Fine Arts Director and Visual Arts Coordinator Lynn Nguyen to select a school to bring to life a theme that reflects this district's appreciation for your service. This year's theme is Helping Kids Soar to Success. School board members shoulder critical responsibilities as advocates for our children. They face difficult challenges and make hard decisions with the overall goal of promoting student achievement. Working as a vital link between the community and the classroom, our board is responsible for an annual general operating budget of more than $527 million, nearly 61,000 students, 8,000 employees, and 77 campuses. We truly appreciate you for voluntarily tackling the enormous job of governing the Arlington Independent School District. At this time, I would like to introduce Jones Academy of Fine Arts and Dual Language Assistant Principal Elizabeth Gonzalez and art teachers Jennifer Kinter and Todd Russell. Jones Academy students of all ages worked very hard to bring to life our theme for this year's appreciation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lisbeth Gonzalez, and I'm currently the assistant principal at Jones Academy. We are very excited and thankful to be here, as this is an honor. Our principal, Katuska Herodor, she's currently attending an advocacy event with TEPSA, so she sends her regards and deepest appreciation. And I would like to thank our Jones Academy parents and staff members who are currently here supporting our students. So at Jones Academy, we pride ourselves in bringing learning to life through visual arts, music, dance, drama, language studies, and culture. Our unique programming and extensive building renovations were made possible through the support of district leadership and our school board members. It is important to note that school board members are volunteers and ordinary citizens, our friends and neighbors, but with an extraordinary dedication to our community and students. School Board President, Mr. Reich, Dr. Reich, I picked two, I was supposed to pick one, right? Mr. Hibbs, Mrs. Mace, Mrs. Walton, Mrs. Hudson, Mr. Chapa, Mr. Hogue, and Dr. Cavazos. We thank each of you for your time and vision of success for our schools and our students. And I just pray that God continues to bless you all. We are happy for the opportunity to bring to life this year's theme of School Board Recognition Month, Helping Kids Soar to Success. And I would like to please welcome our visual arts teachers, Jennifer Kinter and Todd Russell. Thank you.
Good evening. Jones Academy thanks you for the honor of being chosen to create artwork for the AISD board. Much like the school board, we work together as a team, overseeing the success of the visual arts program. I'm Jennifer Kinter. I'm the 2D teacher, and my colleague Todd Russell is a 3D teacher. I've been teaching in the district for 17 years. He's always like this in class, too. For 17 years, and Mr. Russell, he's entering his second year of teaching. As choosing the art students for the project, we wanted to make sure we got from all levels across what we have at our school. Our team of All-Stars is a comprised group of one first grader. Her name is Madison Sabera, a second grader, Noah Torp, Isabella Juarez, a third grader, Brian Shorthall, fourth grader, Landry Rambo, fifth grader, Linda Estrada, and sixth graders, Jadalyn Chavez and Raleigh Muzinski. Our team dubbed themselves the Kite Council, and it met as often as schedules permitted. We would have liked to met with them a little bit more, but they had some things going on like core curriculum and other dual art, fine arts that they had to do. But despite the difficulties with the scheduling, we managed to create a killer art piece. And in our professional opinion, and we really hope you like it. Using the Soar to Success for the students and the teachers, we took a picture that represented the theme. And then we took this image, we expanded it and divided it into 8 equal parts. We purposely abstracted the original image so the students would shift their focus from just replicating what they were looking at and discovered shapes and patterns and lines from the existing original picture. The students then had to account for their own work as well as a relationship to their surrounding work when we brought it back together. The only time they referred to their original image was when the initial outline and when we bring the puzzle it back together. I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Russell to explain how we did it.
Good evening, Mr. Russell, Kite Counselor Council. So once the kids' section had been sketched, they proceeded to design their piece using bleeding tissue paper, Sharpie marker, and collage. For those unfamiliar with bleeding tissue paper, it's a wonderful medium that allows for quick dynamic color application. The students carefully placed the tissue paper using a variety of methods, layering, wrinkling, and crumpling. Then release the tissue paper's color using water and a paintbrush. The amount of time that the tissue paper was left on the surface determined the intensity of color that transferred onto the piece. Depending on how the tissue paper was placed, made for pleasant, unexpected results. If wrinkled or crumpled, gaps formed during color transfer, thus generating unique shapes, patterns, and color in the color field. So not only was the Kite Council dealing with the initial abstracted images, but now patterns born from their color applications. Taking Sharpie markers, they highlighted patterns and color they felt needed emphasizing. The kite tails were designed using collaged magazine pages tailored to each student's unique design concept. Our overall piece is comprised of 8 individual artworks that unite to form a complete composition, much like the school board. Design collaboration was a key component to our project's success. Each of the students examined, critiqued, and revisited their work, as well as the work of their fellow kite counselors. They then made necessary adjustments to their piece to create an overall cohesive composition. Examination and interpretation are core values that we strive to have all our students develop and strengthen during their times at Jones. By repeatedly capturing students' attention through multiple intelligence, we hope to make their learning so dynamic and exciting that they don't even realize it's happening. Ms. Kendra and I were amazed and humbled by the passion and persistence that each one of our students exhibited throughout this art-making process. But really, it's like that every day at Jones Academy. We appreciate your passion and service to our district, and we hope you all enjoy your artwork. Each of you should now consider yourself honorary Kite Council members. So, wonderful. We are ready. No, it goes this way. Right? I fixed it. Okay. Hi. Why don't we show it to them?
So, before the big reveal, did you kids have fun doing this? Was it fun?
Travis.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Excellent.
Well, can we come and go down and get their signatures?
Yes.
And
Sure. Yes. We have Sharpies. We're going to come down with you, and I know I'm interested, and there's probably several that are interested in having your autograph on the back. It's a great work of art. Wow. Our students blowing us away. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Fantastic. Some impressive works, impressive concepts, everything. My gosh. That was wonderful. And I should have said it while they were all still here. We besides the technology, we've had some renovations over the break. So we have new carpeting and new paint. We don't have any art on the walls yet, so it's kind of stark in here. That's going to change, but they probably looked around going, what's going on there? Wonderful. All right, let me get back into the sorts here. So moving on, our next agenda item is the administrative appointments. And the first is the consider the ratification of the administrative appointment. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Reich, and I'd like to recommend that the board ratify and appoint the individuals discussed in closed session for area superintendent and assistant principal for Martin High School.
Okay. This is the first time using this technology, so. Whoops, I just rejected you, Mr. Hibbs. Try again. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Hibbs.
Thank you, President Reich. I move that we accept all the administrative appointments.
And I'm trying to get there, Mr. Chapa. Well, I'm trying. It's telling me I wasn't allowed to.
He's allowed.
Okay.
I second Mr. Hibbs' motion.
All right. So I have a motion and a second to ratify the administrative appointments. Any discussion? Seeing none, the voting screen is up. Please vote. All right, it worked. All right. Congratulations. All trustees voted in the affirmative. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Rice. And I'd like to first introduce our new area superintendent, Dr. Theodore Charco, or TJ. Come on up, TJ. TJ attended Kansas State University for his Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, Texas Christian University for Master of Ed in Ed Administration, and TCU for his Doctor of Education in Ed Administration. Most recently was the Executive Director for Secondary School Leadership in Fort Worth ISD, has been a Director of School Leadership and Learning, a Principal at a high school, a Principal at a middle school, an Assistant Principal at a high school, has taught AP World History and U.S. History as well. TJ, congratulations, welcome. Anything you'd like to say?
Yes, thank you. Board President Reich, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos, I'm very thankful for the opportunity to, an opportunity I won't take lightly, to lead, serve our students, staff, parents, principals, and community members in Arlington ISD. I'm excited to join the team in moving student outcomes forward, and as with all effective leaders, I do have some people here, if it's okay. I'd like to go ahead and to introduce the Department of High Support System. On my left shoulder here, first off, my wife, Jennifer. And also next to her, my brother Benjamin is here today, too. And then I have 4 wonderful children at home that are attempting to watch this. I don't know if they've got a chance to figure that out or not, but my son's birthday is today. He's 14, the oldest Carrie, so happy birthday, son, if you are watching. Blake and Colin, who are 10 and 9, and my youngest, Allison, who is the baby of the group. Just thankful for the opportunity. I look forward to serving principals and schools and staff in Area 4 and moving student outcomes forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce our new assistant principal at Martin High School, Ms. Amanda Cobb. Amanda attended Louisiana Tech University for a Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Administration and Leadership Policy Studies. Most recently, a campus testing facilitator at Seguin High School, has been an AVID coordinator at Seguin High School, 9th and 10th grade biology, 12th grade environmental science or systems teacher, has taught 8th grade science, 7th and 8th grade science as well at a middle school, and 7th grade in Louisiana as well, taught 7th grade. So Amanda, welcome and congratulations.
Thank you. President Reich, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I would like to thank Dr. Buell, Ms. Roddy, and the Martin team for honoring me with the opportunity to serve your campus as part of your outstanding leadership team. To my Seguin family, over the past 7.5 years, thank you for your unconditional love and support and truly being a family to me. I want to thank my principals and administrators over the past several years, specifically Mr. Hill, Mr. Nix, Mr. Borden, Ms. Lundeen, Mr. Humes, Ms. Darkwa, Ms. Wesco, and Ms. Bonneau. Thank you for not only being my friend and support system through the years, but thank you for coaching and mentoring me and showing me the value of growing leadership in others. I also want to thank my Emerging Leaders Director, Dr. Marsha Hollis, and my cohort team, and my Algebra 1 data team at Seguin. I thank them for the support, the processes, the openness, the willingness to work with me as we implemented data-driven instruction, and I'm very proud of my team and the successes that they have already achieved this year. I want to also thank my family and the village of people who help care for my sweet boys. Without your support and encouragement, I wouldn't be where I am today. I would like to thank my husband specifically. He is watching online tonight from Cook Children's Hospital with my son, John Raven. I want to thank him because he has always encouraged me to get outside of my comfort zone, to see the big picture, but yet keep my feet on the ground. To my sons, William and John Raven, thank you for reminding me daily of what's important in life, and to remind me that little wins always lead to great successes. I want to thank my parents and introduce them. They are here tonight to support me. Thank you for always pushing me to be my best from the time I was little, and also being my biggest cheering section. I am truly honored and excited to be Warrior Strong, and to continue to grow my leadership and to grow my family with the faculty and staff at Martin High School. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to make an introduction. This is not a position that we bring for board approval, but we do introduce an important position, a Director of School Improvement, and that's Dr. Natalie Lopez. Come on up, Natalie. Natalie attended the University of Texas at Austin, Bachelor of Arts in History, UT Arlington for a Master of Ed in Ed Administration, UT Arlington for a doctorate in Ed Leadership and Policy Studies. Most recently has been our Coordinator of Research and Evaluation, has taught geometry, Algebra 2, math models, AP statistics, secondary math as well. And so Natalie, Dr. Lopez, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. President Reich, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos, thank you so much for the opportunity to serve as the Director of School Improvement for Arlington. It's truly a privilege to obtain a position of this caliber, the level of involvement with campuses, administrators, and senior staff. And it's an honor to have the responsibilities involved with the various projects that we complete, and statistical analysis, and the continuous improvement efforts, and alignment of goals and expectations throughout the district. I feel like I trust that God has guided my path, and I was an educator, classroom teacher for 11 years, and I really enjoyed every minute of that. And so the kind of realization that I was needing to move on was difficult, and also scary, but good thing the Lord knows better than I do what's best for me. And so working for the Office of Research and Accountability has, it's just been a blessing, and I've learned so much, and I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Barlow. Just, I feel like I'll be forever indebted to you, Dr. Barlow. He's behind me, but I have something. Because I learn something new every day, and not just about how to complete a project or about how to perform a function on the computer, but about, he always shares his views and his thoughts on, from a conceptual standpoint, on everything that we do and how all the parts contribute to our final product, and how those products are used by district leaders to, continue various components of the district that are maximizing student success. And that's, it's just an honor to be a part of the team. And Dr. Barlow is an excellent leader and teacher, and I just want to thank him for the opportunity to work in the department, to acknowledge my work ethic and my contribution, and the motivation that he provides to our team on a continual basis, so that we strive to be our best, so that we can give the district everything that we possibly can. And I'd like to also thank Jody Peoples, the secretary to the executive director. Jody has made the transition to Arlington so smooth and easy, and she's made the department so warm and welcoming, and she's such a professional. And I feel like if I have a question about anything Arlington ISD, she is the expert, and she knows the answers. So she's been a wonderful go-to, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. And to Dr. Porterfield and the specialists in the assessment office, along with all of our programmers, they have such great synergy, and they work at they're such a great team, and I've just been learning a tremendous amount from them, and I'm grateful to be able to make a contribution with them. My son is sick with the flu, and so my husband was not able to be here tonight, and my family's not here, but I know they'll watch. And so I just wanted to thank my husband, Matt. He's the best friend I could ask for, and he's always been very supportive and just unending support in all of my endeavors. And Austin and Dylan, thank you for understanding how important my job is to me and my impact on education. And I just want you all to know that I will give my all each and every day to fulfill the requirements of the director position and to maximize any possible contributions I can make to the district and for our students. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome to our district. Welcome to new positions of opportunity within the district, and for what great things you'll do for our students. That's what it's all about. As is our custom, I'd like to ask each of you to follow Mr. Hill this evening out to the lobby for a brief reception so that we can say hello and congratulate you in person. I ask the audience to please let the board go first so that we can come back as soon as possible to continue on with our business. And we will take a brief break and be back here at 8 o'clock. Thank you. All right, I now call this meeting back to order. Next on our agenda, we have a public hearing on the TAPR, the Texas Academic Performance Report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Reich. And this time I'd like to introduce Dr. Barlow to help us with this presentation. And along with Cindy, they'll both make the TAPR presentation, or the Texas Academic Performance Report presentation. So Dr. Barlow.
Good evening, Dr. Reich, members of the board, and Dr. Cavazos. So this is the annual event. We do this once a year, usually in January, where we have the TAPR report. You've seen some of this information already, so I won't dwell on some of the slides that you've already seen. We'll spend a little bit of time on some of the ones maybe you haven't seen, and then we'll just kind of go through the slides, and then Ms. Fallon has a few slides towards the end. So bear with me. I'm going to try to use the new technology here. Mark was kind of showing us that at the break, and so we'll see if we can work through this. So let's go ahead and get started here. What is the TAPR report? Well, basically, that's all information about any of the performance indicators for the district and the campuses. So the challenge there, I've just got a couple of notes here, is that when you look at the whole report, it's about 1,300 pages long. So we're going to condense that down into a few slides tonight. So it becomes quite challenging. I don't think anybody wants me 100 pages worth of data, which just would be pretty painful.
Thank you, Dr.
It's intended to inform the public about the educational performance of the district and each of the campuses in relation to the district, the state, and a comparable group of schools. Has four major components: the district performance, the district participation, district attendance and post-secondary readiness, and then the district profile. Talk a little bit about district performance. We've seen some of these data already over the last several months. Basically, we look at our index system with respect to accountability. The four indexes, which we know that's going to change this year, so that they'll look a little different. We're not sure exactly what that's going to be like when we get to the end of the year. But these data have been already presented earlier in the school year. But basically, Index 1, we had a score of 71, Index 2 of 41, Index 3 of 39, and Index 4 of 74. And you can see the standards there of 60, 22, 28, and 60. So we're above the standard in all of those. The districts are only have only one possible distinction. We did not earn that. It's very difficult to earn it. It's on the post-secondary readiness. Very few districts get that. So let's talk a little bit about similar districts. So we like to kind of compare ourselves to similar districts in order to get some sort of understanding with respect to a relative performance. A lot of times we look at absolute numbers. Those aren't quite as meaningful sometimes as maybe some relative numbers are. So we've run something similar like this the last couple of years, where we look at our scores and then we turn those into percentiles using some similar districts. And basically the group that we compare ourselves to are districts that have within plus or minus 10% economically disadvantaged. It seems like a good indicator. We could probably do a lot of other indicators when we're trying to group those, but that's usually a pretty good baseline. It usually ends up being about 400 districts. We compare ourselves to those, and then we run a percentile on that. So basically, when we'll do an example here. So see if I can use the laser pointer here. So basically, if I'm looking at 2016, this 57th percentile, what that means is that in Index 1, in 2016, we scored a 71, but the 57th percentile means that that was better than 57% of those districts that were like us. 57%, we did as well or better than 50% of those districts. If we look at this year, in 2017, we did as well or better than 56% of those districts. So we're in the 56th percentile. Dropped just a hair there, but it's still only a point there. When we go to Index 2, though, we see that last year we were at the 73rd percentile, but then we increased 11 points to the 84th percentile. So we're making a lot of gains in Index 2. Pretty much everything that we've run internally, everything that we're seeing with the state data, shows that when we start talking about progress measures, which basically that's what Index 2 is, that we are really outperforming our peers in that area. Sometimes it doesn't show up in some of the other indicators, but progress is showing up quite a bit. And that's a big deal because to me, as long as we're doing better than we did yesterday, well then that's a good thing. So when we look at Index 3, last year 66th percentile and the 68th percentile this year, and then we dropped just a little bit there in Index 4 from the 47th to the 46th. We look at something similar here with respect to index scores for the district high schools, junior highs, and elementary. So we do a little bit of grouping there and try to come up with an aggregate for those campus levels. You can see here, I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but basically if I'm looking at the district, these are the numbers we just looked at with respect to absolute values. We had some increases there in Index 2, 3, and 4. We stayed the same in Index 1. When I look at just high schools, we stayed steady at Index 1, but had increases in Index 2, 3, and 4, with a 9-point increase there on Index 4. And then with junior highs, we had the increase at Index 2 of 3 points, and then elementaries increases on Index 1 and 2, a little bit of a loss there on Index 3. Whoops. So we look at our campus ratings summary. The high schools, we had 9 of 9 that met standards, so we had 0 that were improvement required there. In junior high, we had 10 of 10 meet the standard, 0 improvement required. And at elementaries, we had 52 of 54, with 2 of those being improvement required, Wimbish and Peach. If you remember when we presented data back earlier in the year, that we also had shortlisted there. We filed an appeal for that, won the appeal, and so they came off the list there. So they are now met standard for this year. Look at safeguards. Notice that we have performance rates, safeguards 39 of 52 of 75%. We're at 100% on participation rates, graduation rates 33%, and in the federal limits on alternative assessments 100%. the total there being 77%. And that's about average for other districts. Very seldom do we see somebody have 100% on those safeguards. I want to talk just briefly about the passing standards and the inconsistency over the last several years. What we like to do is we like to run trend data over multiple years. We'd like to use like a 5-year time period. That becomes quite difficult when they keep changing the standard. So I presented a slide similar to this last year. Won't spend a lot of time on it. But basically, when you go back a couple of years, we had one version, the first version of standards, we had that phase in 1, phase in 2, and then recommended. Before we could even implement that, then we went to a second version, which is phase in 1, phase in 2, phase in 3 recommended. Before we could implement that, then we went with this progression model. And now that we're in this fourth version where we have the approaches grade level and master's grade level. Let me show you an example of that is that let's go to the math example here. So in May of 2015, the standard for, I believe this is fourth grade math, was 1453 to pass, and the standard in May of 2016 is 1467. So if we want to do any sort of multi-year comparison when those standards are changing, we've got to go back and we've got to change all the standards to something similar so that we can actually compare Met standard. So it becomes quite challenging. This current year, though, as compared to last year, they've actually got to where the standard stayed the same twice, which is very helpful. So using that same example, you can see in 2016 we had 1467 on this example, and 2017 1467. So the standard has leveled out a little bit there. We hope that that will continue, although as we look at the new ESSA requirements and so forth, I'm not sure exactly where we're going to land on that with the approaches and the meets grade level. But it becomes quite challenging when the standard changes from year to year as far as doing like a year-over-year comparison. So we're going to keep moving on and start looking at some actual results. Again, we've already seen some of these results, but basically, if I'm looking at all subjects and I want to see the percent increase or decrease, I'm just going to scan across this bottom line here. I can see that when we're talking about all subjects in the all category or all students, we have 0% as far as an increase, so we didn't lose any ground. We didn't gain any ground either. We can see a couple of single digits there across the board, across the bottom there, 1%. 2%, 2%, 1%, and so forth. So basically staying steady on all subjects. When I get to reading, a 2% gain for all students. And then you can see just up and down a little bit as we go across from the different student groups. So African American down 1, Hispanic down 2, white looks like it's down 1, and so forth. So you can see single digit either up or down with respect to reading with that 2 point. Actually, I think I said a 2 point gain, I can barely read on the screen here, so I'm going to cheat a little bit. Sorry about that, it's a 2 point decrease, not a 2 point gain. If we go to mathematics, here we had the 4 point gain, and this was what we saw gains probably more than any other subject is the mathematics. In many areas that we studied, we had a little bit of a gain from last year to this year in mathematics. And you can see here in the difference, 4 point gain with all students, 5 point African American, Hispanic 4 points, white 1 point, 4 American Indian on across the board there. With a couple of nice gains there in special ed, 5%, economically Spanish 5%, and ELL 6%. So really across the board gains in the math area. When I go to writing, I had a little bit of a loss there with 4 points. And then you can see the up or down there across that bottom line again. Sometimes it may be a loss in 3 points, 4 points, and so forth. But really the writing is where we lost. If we lost ground, it's really kind of in that writing. We have an initiative that with respect to the curriculum office as far as trying to push that forward and get some gains there in writing. Look at science, basically holding steady there. If I look at that all students category, the 0%, and then again, kind of up and down across the student groups there. Social studies looks very similar, 0% there on the all gains. And then again, single digits, either loss or gain when we go across the student groups there. So basically, math was the big winner there with respect to having a gain over the last year. I mean, we had an increase there in math, which that's a good thing because math is usually one of the more difficult ones to get a gain in. It had that writing loss, but have some initiatives there in order to address that. So let's go to distinctions. We had 33 campuses received at least 1 distinction. You can see them listed there. I won't read through all of those, but basically it covers all of the subject areas. And then you have these student progress measures, closing the performance gaps, and then post-secondary readiness. So what I'll do on these next slides is I'll just read the top of the slide. I'm not going to read all the campuses. You can see the campuses listed. If the campus is listed on that slide, they got the distinction for that area. So I'll just kind of do a brief moment on that slide, let you kind of scan that. I'm not going to read all of the campuses there, but basically reading English language arts, the distinctions there. We had 20 campuses. You can see several high schools, several junior highs, and several elementaries. You can see them listed there. We move on to mathematics. We had 16 campuses. Again, we had a nice representation of high schools, junior highs, and then several elementaries there. We move on to science. We had 21 campuses get the distinction in science. Again, many of the high schools, many of the junior highs, and several elementaries. And in social studies, we had 7 campuses. One thing to note is that elementary doesn't have a social studies test, so it's not possible to get a distinction there because there's not a test there to get the distinction on, so that's why there's none listed. But you can see 3 high schools and 4 junior highs. We moved to the student progress. So this is that progress measure where did we do better than we did last year. So 21 campuses there got the distinction in student progress. You can see 2 high schools, about 4 or 5 junior highs, and then several elementaries. And in the closing the performance gaps, 15 campuses there. This is where we're trying to bring the different student groups together, or at least reach a similar bar with respect to the standard there, so that they're performing similarly. You see Seguin got the distinction there for the high schools, 3 junior highs, and then several elementaries there. Post-secondary readiness, 15 campuses. That's 3 high schools, several junior highs, several elementaries. I believe that is the end of the distinction slide. So we'll move on to bilingual education. We look at, here we look at bilingual education from 2016-2017. We have the all test basically stayed steady there with a 0% gain. Reading, you can see that that is a 2% loss, with math being a 3% gain. There again, that math sticks out again. Every time we run the math results, we did really well in the math. Writing being staying steady at 53%, and then science with a 1% gain there. ESL, so the other component of our ELL programs, very similar here where we had some gains across the board. The all test, 2% gain. Reading with a 0% gain, 7% gain there in math again. Again, that math keeps sticking out every time we run analysis on that. A little bit of loss there in writing, a gain in science, and then a little bit of loss there in social studies. So we go to this Texas Consolidated School Rating report, several pieces that we see with respect to the state and how they rate campuses and districts. We have the academic rating, which we had met standard there. We just reviewed that. The financial rating of superior. And then you may recall that back in the summer we did the community and student engagement report with respect to ratings there. You'll see them listed. I won't go through all of them, but basically we were exemplary in all of those except for the community parent involvement, which was recognized. Moving on to district participation, basically there's a high expectation that there's a high participation in all of our testing programs and so forth, and we're basically right at the state level there with 99%. AISD is 99% as well. And then we move to district attendance and post-secondary readiness. So our attendance rate stays pretty steady. You can see just a little bit of a point, I think it's a 0.1 gain there from last year to this year, and similar results across the student groups. Graduation rates. This is the so we have the 4-year graduation rate, and then we have the 5-year graduation rate. So the 4-year graduation rate there we have in 2015, we had 84.4, and we dropped just a little bit there to 2016 and 84.1. So a little bit of a loss there in the 4-year graduation rate. But then when we move on to the, I'm going to skip that slide and come back to it. When we move on to the 5-year graduation rate, there we see a 1.4% increase. So as we had conversations internally, felt like that was a very impressive number there. We're going from the 4-year to the 5-year. Obviously, we want students to graduate in 4 years, but certainly we want them to graduate, whether it takes 5 years or not. We want them to graduate. So the initiative there then would be to move those to where they're graduating. Students are graduating in 4 years instead of waiting until that 5th year. I'm going to go back up to that one slide that I skipped, the 4-year dropout rates there. You can see that from the 2015 and 16 classes, the 4-year dropout rate is about a 1% there, and then we go down to the 5-year dropout rate decreases there to, or we had a little bit of improvement there where It wasn't a 1% increase, it was a 0% increase. And I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Powell, and she's got a few slides here.
Good evening, Dr. Reich, board members, Dr. Cavazos. The fourth section of the TAPR report contains demographic information about our students and our staff. And then at the very end of the report, there's a link to some financial information, and I'll touch on all that very briefly. In terms of our students, the student data that you see here was captured on the last Friday of October of 2016, a snapshot date that everybody in the state uses and takes a picture of all their student and staff on that day for filing purposes to TEA. So on that date, in fall of 2016, we had a total of 62,085 students, and that was actually down about 1,000 students, a little over 1,000. We've seen a couple of years of decreases in enrollment. You see here the distribution, the ethnic distribution of all of our students. We are a very diverse district, as we all know. In terms of our economically disadvantaged population, over 69% of all of our students are qualified as economically disadvantaged, and that's quite a bit higher than the state average of 59%. In terms of English language learners, there again, a larger percentage of our student enrollment were classified as English language learners than the statewide percentage. We are at 27.1% in fall of 2016. And then our at-risk population is 60% compared to the state average of 50%. And at-risk is determined by a set of 13 criteria that the state gives school districts. In our case, the reason that our at-risk percentage seems to outpace the state mirrors our English language learner population. English language learner is one of those 13 criteria that the state publishes that would classify a student as being at risk. And as you can see, we have a higher percentage of our students are English language learners rather than the statewide percentage, and then that in turn drives our at-risk population to be higher than the state average. This chart simply shows the ethnic breakdown of all of our students. Again, you can see that our Hispanic student population is the largest grouping of our students, followed by African Americans and white students, and then Asian students. In terms of our staff, the staff data also was collected on that last Friday in October of 2016. And our total staff reported here is 8,781 individuals, and you can see the distribution of that staff across different categories and how we compare to the state. Pretty similar to the state in all of these different categories. In terms of students per teacher, this is a very high-level, simple application that simply takes all of our students divided by the total teacher count. So our average class size across all grades and all student populations is 14.7 students, and that's slightly less than the state average. Our teachers, as you see, in terms of years experience, very comparable to the state in both their total years experience and the years that they spend here in Arlington ISD. Our instructional staff percentage is higher than the state, and that's something very important to us. You'll see a couple of places in here where it becomes very apparent that we do a good job of concentrating our resources into the classroom, and this is one of the places you see that. The instructional staff percentage is literally, it's actually based on work hours, but it's the percentage of our staff's time as against all staff's time for those individuals who work in the classroom. So teachers, teaching assistants, librarians, counselors, anybody that has a direct contact with students is part of that calculation. And you can see that a greater percentage of our staff is dedicated to student instruction than the state percentage. On the very last page of the TAPR report, there's actually a hyperlink to a report that has financial data in it for us. The financial data that's included in the 2016-17 TAPR report is actually from our 2015-2016 audit, so it is a bit dated. But we use this data when we get into budget season. We are presenting information about our budget. We have a group of districts that we compare ourselves to just on general operating expenditures. The data you see here tonight is presented for all funds because that's the way the state data is presented in the summary report that you all have before you. So in terms of total operating expenditures per student, in the 15-16 year, we spent $9,635 per student compared to statewide average $9,373. And I'll again say this is all funds. So bond funds, grant funds, food service, the general operating fund. So I think you can see where our bond program expenditures are driving up our overall expenditures per student for this particular presentation. When we work on budget and we look at how we compare with other districts, we look at general fund expenditures because those are strictly operating costs, and so we can capture those from one district to the next and not have the varying things such as a bond program or maybe different types of grants that we might have that somebody else doesn't or somebody else has that we don't. So in terms of the functional categories, everything below that top line is a subcategory of that top line. These are different accounting functions that we are required to report to the state. In looking again at instruction, you can see that we spend more money per student on classroom instruction than the statewide average per student. The other item that we like to point out is on general administration. Further down the list, we spend less money per student than the statewide average on general administration. Taking that same data then and looking at our expenditures as a percent of our budget, again, you see the same thing that in the functional category for instruction, our expenditures there make up a greater percentage of our total budget than the statewide percentage. And you can see down throughout the different functional categories, we're pretty comparable in most other areas to state averages. The other one that is of note where we do vary from the state is in general administration. We spend less than half in terms of the percent of our budget that represents or that's spent in general administration. Our percentage is less than half of the state percentage. And finally, in terms of looking at instructional expenditure ratio, this again is a calculation that takes expenditures from classroom instruction, libraries, staff development, counseling, and divides that by total expenditures. And so you can again see here that we spend a greater percentage of our budget on instructional purposes than the state as a whole does. And then looking at the unassigned portion of our general fund balance, we have a much greater percentage of our expenditure budget available to us in our general fund balance than other districts across the state. So that's an indication that we are very healthy financially. So with that, Dr. Barlow and I will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much for the information. It's impressive. Okay, first we do have some questions from trustees. Ms. Mays.
Thank you, President Reich. It does sound like I'm echoing throughout. I'm going to whisper and it's going to sound loud for everybody. Thank you, Dr. Barlow, and Cindy, I appreciate, Mrs. Powell, I appreciate the information. I'm just going to go through a couple of things. I just have some comments and then a couple of questions. One on our district accountability rating, slide number 5. Very happy to see the progress for student progress and closing the gaps. All indexes are very important. Those two are a little bit more passionately important to me, so I am really excited about hoping to see that continue on that upward trajectory. Then on slide number 8, last time, Dr. Barlow, I believe, when you made a presentation to us, one of the questions I asked when we were talking about the appeal for short, and we were looking at one of the main criteria being based on nationality, and I think I asked a question if you were biracial and that's how you reported yourself, if you counted in that number, and I think your answer was no. So first I want to confirm that that's what you said, and then second I want to know if, and Cindy, this may be a question for you, who could we go to ask about that? Because as we saw with short, we're talking about 1 or 2 counts. So there could be situations where that really could make a difference. So I'm just wondering, how can we find out if those numbers do need to count? Just in reality, biracial population is increasing, so our student population in that respect is increasing. So,
trying to reflect back on our conversations. So with respect to, let's talk about the 2 or more races first. And so if a student or their parents select that as their ethnicity, then they would go down as 2 or more races. And that if there's enough in that student group, it would go into certain parts of the accountability system. So it's not that that would not just automatically not go in. They would go into certain parts with respect to that group if there's a certain number of students there. It's usually 25 or more with respect to that group. If we're going back, reflecting back on short, I'm trying to remember back on our appeal for that. I believe our appeal on that for that was index 1, where the ethnicity doesn't factor in. It's just all students in all tests. And what we did on that appeal was we saw that we were one test short, regardless of what student group that test fell in. It was one a test short. And we had some writing tests that we sent off, had rescored. We had 2 or 3 of them come back that were moved up to a passing, and then that put us over the mark. So I think there's 2 different pieces there. One of them was the short appeal where we did the writing rescore. And then I believe the one that we may be talking about on student groups might have been with Wimbish. We were one student, I think we went back a year, we did some calculation, we were one student short in the white student group. And in that particular scenario, it was by student group or ethnicity, so that one would have counted. But just going back to the 2 or more races, if there's 25 or more in the group, in any group, whether it's white, African American, or whatever, then it goes into the system on certain parts. I'm not sure if that, I hope that answers your question, or if it doesn't, I can clarify.
It does, but I guess my question is maybe a question to administration on who can we contact, or who do we talk to about either making that a change to where if you check biracial in the situation you're talking about, that you would not count when it comes to either saying a school does pass or a school does not pass, or how they're rated.
So when we're talking about the accountability process, that's a state level decision. So there's nothing that we could do with respect to changing it internally.
I'm talking about getting it changed at that level.
I mean, we can always contact TEA and we can voice our opinion. Certainly, as we go into the new accountability system, we're fortunate that I sit on the ATAC committee, which advises the commissioner and TEA staff with respect to accountability measures. That particular question hasn't come up, but actually we're meeting in a couple of weeks, and so I can certainly try to interject that.
I would love for you to ask that question. Sure. I mean, if all of our students count, if you say you're biracial and you don't count in anything, in education, that wouldn't make sense to me. I would appreciate you asking that question. Thank you. And then on slide number 16, the writing, when there's on the Pacific Islanders for writing of 2017, there's nothing there. and then for 2016, you had 62%, so it totaled in a difference of a negative 62%. Did that get calculated in the overall of the negative 4%?
No, that was a misprint on we shouldn't put anything there for Pacific Islander with respect to doing that difference there. But the overall, it would have been all students in the overall, regardless of what that would have been.
Okay.
We should have just left that blank. I didn't notice that. We should have just left it blank on the Pacific Islander.
And then for American Indian, is there any indicator as to why that's such a huge difference? Was there anything?
Just small groups. Anytime we have really small groups, if we had, it could be 2 or 3 students one way or the other, depending on the size of the group, absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay, and then on slide 26, to see Arlington Collegiate High School for post-secondary readiness, that's very encouraging.
They're doing a great job over there. It's outstanding.
And then on slide 35, I don't know if this is the same situation, but with the Pacific Islanders, it's the same thing. We didn't have any information for 16, so that did not, I'm assuming.
Yes, that would have been the same. That would have been the same situation.
Okay. And then, Dr. Cavazos, can you just please, very briefly, remind what the district means when we say to graduate on time?
Yeah, so when we say graduate on time, that really the highest standard to that is the 4-year graduation. And we had this conversation, and we have it internally, that the 4-year graduation rate is our aim, absolutely. But overall, we want students to graduate from high school. And so if it takes them 4.5, 5 years to graduate, that's a big accomplishment. And so that's why they report both, because the 4-year is the highest standard, really important, but it wouldn't show the true picture of how many students actually graduate from our high schools. But on time is 4 years.
Okay, and when you're considered on track to graduation, is that individualized, or is on track meaning that you would still graduate within that 4 years?
So that's kind of a deeper one in the on track, but the on track in essence means that you're on track to graduate on time. In essence, in 4 years, yeah. Okay. And that's, again, the highest standard. It's important to have that standard. But we also know that there's a lot of life situations that, and actually persistence in pursuing graduation and ultimately graduating sometimes makes a student even more prepared for life. So we value both, but the highest standard and on time is 4 years.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. And then Cindy, on slide 39, I think you touched on this, and if you say yes, you did, then I know that you said all that I need to, but my question was going to be for the economically disadvantaged, the English language learners, and at risk, if that was a coincidence that it was within that 10% range, and I think you touched on that a lot of that population overlaps.
Overlaps, it does, absolutely. Let me get to that slide.
39 for us.
All right, so our economically disadvantaged population is identified by federal poverty standards, kids who are qualified for free and reduced lunch. A lot of that information comes to us through state data feeds these days for kids who have qualified already for CHIPS program or something with the state. And then also kids whose parents have completed applications for free reduced lunch here in our district. English language learners, again, as you note, a larger percentage of our student population is ELL than the statewide student population. In terms of at risk, the state defines at risk by 13 different criteria, and it could be that a student failed a test and STAR test, that they are behind grade level by 1 year, they are pregnant or they are parenting, or they are English language learners. So the fact that we have a larger percentage of our students who are English language learners will also affect the calculation here of students who are at risk.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, President Rice. Lots of good questions, Ms. Mays.
Hold on, it's
I'm not on.
it's not letting me.
My mic's still on.
I've only got one question, Ms. Mays. You could probably answer.
There you go.
There you go. I should, now that he has me on, go, I'm good, Dr. Reich, I don't need anything. Thank you, Mr. Powell and Dr. Barlow. Like many of my colleagues, we use the TAPR constantly year-round. The one question I have as we start going into this is we always get that adage of you're too many principals, too top-heavy, too many administrators, and you see our numbers that we show right there on our percent. As those percentages change, is there any way, and I don't need a detailed of all the, and I don't know what slide it is, go to the one on this funding, on actual spend per expenditure. Something like that. Ms. Powell, could you show me, and not right now, just send out to the board later, the 5-year trend of what's happening on that? I think it'll help us to be able to see exactly where those trends are going, and maybe not in that one, the one where it's showing percentages instead of dollars on that, because inflation, things like that, I'd rather look at the percentages. That's the exact slide I was talking about. If we can show, if it's 5's too much, if I can at least see the 3-year trend, I can see what's happening and make sure we're staying consistent on those type of numbers.
We can, we'll get that. That's easy to get. I will point out that, again, this is all funds.
Right.
And so if you look back over that 5-year period, inside of that 5-year period, now we started our bond program.
I fully understand that.
We have a lot of expenditures there that will kind of change the look of this a little bit.
And that's actually why I'm asking. I want to be able to track that. So each year, if I can start seeing that on a 5-year, it helps us start seeing where the allocation's going and make sure we're not getting too out of sorts on any of those that we're tracking on. So I appreciate these TAPR reports are awesome. When someone asks you questions, this is a very detailed budget, very detailed information of academic results, of students, of breakdown students. I know I speak for all my colleagues. I go to the TAPR report constantly when someone asks a question, and we're supposed to know everything. It's probably my first go-to report, so I appreciate that, and thank you for all y'all's work.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. I don't see, well, Ms. Hudson, but before I relinquish the floor, while we're on this particular slide, I just wanted to point out an observance that I had, which is even though we're higher than this state, we're higher in good areas. Instructional related, school, instructional leadership, student support services, school leadership is lower, but we have Holdsworth and we have other sources that are actually enhancing that in our district. And then if you look at other areas, general administration, as you highlighted, being lower, plant maintenance and operations being higher, security being higher, well, that sounds like our priorities are in the right place.
So the plant services is a good example of where bond expenditures will drive that particular functional category up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So to me, the observation is putting everything we can into our students, running the district as efficiently as possible, and having those higher priorities where it's needed, safety, security, that type of thing. Thank you very much for allowing me that, Ms. Hudson. Please go ahead.
Thank you, President Reich. I just have one question. My colleagues made a lot of good points and asked some good questions that I had as well. I certainly don't think that the test scores that are reflected here is the only measure of our school, but in some ways it is an important measure. So when I'm looking at the distinctions, if I understand that correctly, that means that these schools have performed better than other schools who look the same as them demographically and the student population that they serve. But do I understand that correctly?
Yeah, so that kind of goes back to that relative performance that I was describing earlier with percentiles. Absolute values don't really mean a whole lot sometimes, but when I put it into relative performance, and that's exactly what the distinctions are, is they group them in those 40 schools that look like them, and then if you're in that top quartile in certain areas, well, then you would get the distinction.
Okay, cool. So now that I'm sure that I understand that correctly, I can't help but notice that a higher percentage of our high schools and junior highs are earning distinctions compared to the percentage of our elementary schools, if that makes sense. Kudos to all of the schools that are earning these distinctions. I know they work really, really hard to earn that, but I'm wondering, how does this inform our work
going forward when we look at the difference between the number of elementary schools compared to our total elementary schools that are earning these distinctions compared to the secondary?
Sure. So the principals have access to that, and they go through that with a fine-tooth comb with respect to, because all the indicators, and with respect to whether it's, sometimes the indicator may be more of a participation indicator, like the high school has several participation indicators. So if you have a high percent participating in AP exams or, you know, that type of thing. And then some of them are what I would call performance indicators, where if you have test scores or AP scores or that type of thing, that is in the higher area there with respect to their peer groups. Sometimes with the elementary, they don't have quite as many participation indicators, so that kind of influences that a little bit. So that may be why we don't see some of the elementaries that we do sometimes. But all the principals go through these data, and they go through all the indicators, and they'll call our office and ask questions about how can they improve this, or you know, which indicators are holding them back from getting that distinction, that sort of thing.
And can you tell me, are there opportunities for these principals and the staff at these schools to get together and share best practices? So if, for instance, you see a school that looks like you that's earned a distinction and you haven't, is there a chance for them to get together and sort of compare notes and say, what is it that we can do differently?
I believe they do a lot of that work in their area superintendent meetings. I don't participate in all of those, so that may be a question for the areas. But I know that as the areas meet with their groups and their peer groups, they do a lot of discussion about best practices and data, and how do they move on and improve.
Thank you.
Sorry. Mr. Chapa.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out real quick some things that I thought that the district deserves kudos and our teachers deserve kudos on that aren't necessarily in the presentation that you just gave, Dr. Barlow, but are sort of buried in this mountain of data that we've been provided, and that you know, that I looked over. And just to point out some things that I thought were really interesting, I don't think a lot of people know that I think people should know, where we outperformed at our district level. We outperformed the state average. And so, for example, in terms of completion of 2 or more advanced or dual credit courses, 3 points better than the state average. In terms of AP IB course completion, we're almost 4.5 points better than the state average. Average SAT score, and I thought this was really surprising, we're 5 points better than the state average. We're above the state average in terms of average ACT score, and 2 points better in terms of graduates enrolled in Texas institutions of higher education. And then I think this is really valuable because we talk about getting students ready for college. For our students who are moving on to college, we're 2 points better than the state average in terms of graduates who go on to Texas institutions of higher education that don't need remediation. And so I think that speaks volumes about the progress that we're making in the district, the success of our students, and the hard work that our teachers are putting in. And I just wanted to point those things out.
Absolutely, thank you.
Well stated, absolutely. I don't see any other lights from trustees. I just have one small question on the consolidated school rating report. We had exemplary in all of these categories under community and student engagement subcategories, except for community and parent involvement was recognized. It seems, in my perspective, is that we do so much in that arena. What would cause the recognized versus an exemplary?
So those are internal measures, and we have criteria back in the office. I don't remember the exact. I certainly could write that up and send it to the board.
No,
but,
no, that's okay.
I just don't remember all the criteria there for that one.
Okay, but it's internal versus.
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right, I don't see any other. I'm used to saying lights, but it's not lights. No more comments. I don't see any cards. So no comments from the audience. So at this point, the public hearing on the Texas Academic Performance Report is now closed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great information. Okay. Moving on, the open forum for agenda items. I don't see any cards, so we will move on. Next, we have action items, And the first one is the only one is consider the order of election for the school board. Do I have a motion to consider the order of election for the school board? Oh, sorry. Oh, wait. I just rejected you. Hold on. Let's try this again. Okay.
Don't take that, Miss Walton. Don't take that.
Miss Walton.
I move that we accept the administration's recommendation for election for school board.
Thank you. Oh, I've got to turn off your mic. I'll close it for you. Ms. Mays?
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion by Ms. Walton, a second by Ms. Mays to call the order of election for the school board. Now, everyone will have to bear with me. I have a long thing that I'm supposed to read, but I don't have it in front of me. I think I left it with our legal. Oh, thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Okay. So here we go. And it's a full page, so bear with me. I have to read this whole thing. Order of election. A general election is hereby ordered. Wait a minute. I don't do that. We have to vote first. This technology threw me off. And okay, there we go. All right, let's vote. Okay, all trustees present vote in the affirmative. Now I will read with that approved motion, the order of election. A general election is hereby ordered to be held Saturday, May 5th, 2018, for the purpose of electing members to the Board of Trustees of the Arlington Independent School District to fill place numbers 1, 2, 3, and the final year of a 3-year term for place number 5. The main early voting polling site for all voters residing in the Arlington ISD, including the portion of the district that lies within the city of Arlington, the city of Dalworthington Gardens, the Tarrant County portion of the city of Grand Prairie, and the town of Pantego, will be at the following location, which is the Tarrant County Election Center, 2700 Premier Street, Fort Worth, Texas, 76111, between the hours of 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, beginning April 23rd, 2018 through May 1st, 2018, between the hours of 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturday, April 28th, 2018, between the hours of 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Sunday, April 29th, 2018, and between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Monday and Tuesday, April 30th and May 1st, 2018. Applications for a ballot by mail for voters residing in the Arlington Independent School District shall be mailed to Early Voting Clerk, P.O. Box 961011, Fort Worth, Texas 76161, or an email transmission of a completed scanned application for a ballot by mail containing an original signature can be mailed to votebymail@tarrantcounty.com. Applications for a ballot must be received no later than the close of business on Tuesday, April 24th, 2018. The order of election may be amended at a later date to include early voting sites added or deleted due to joint elections with other political subdivisions. Issued this 18th day of January 2018. Okay. Thank you. Moving on. The next item on our agenda is discussion action. Consider the 2018-19 school calendar. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Rice. And this evening we'd like to bring a recommendation for a school calendar for the following school year. We also have some information about continuing the work and proceeding to the 1920 school year and the process we're going to follow on that. Mr. Hill has led a committee. We've obtained a lot of input, a lot of feedback from our staff, and so this evening we present our recommendation. Mr. Hill.
Thank you. Greetings, Dr. Reich, board members, and Dr. Cavazos, and thank you for the opportunity to present this calendar information. I want to a presentation here. I first wanted to start off by recognizing by name the calendar committee members. Some are here, and I appreciate their efforts for being here tonight as well as throughout this entire process. We had a committee consisting of students, parents, teachers, administrators, just a good mix of people that came together and put some thought and effort into this calendar process. A little bit about the timeline. November the 14th, we had a calendar presentation to the DIDC. November 28th, the calendar presentation and a survey to the teacher focus groups. November 29th, all the campus principals and assistant principals completed the survey. December 4th, we had a calendar committee meeting to kind of process some of that survey information. December the 6th, we came back with an update to the board committee based on what we discussed on the 4th. On December the 7th through the 14th, we administered that same survey to the entire district, all employees across the district, and gathered that feedback. December 7th, we did an update to the board as to where we were in the process for the entire calendar and what progress we had made at that point and what the steps were for moving forward. December the 18th, the committee met and we developed some options. On January 8th, we had a follow-up committee meeting. We had a update to the board committee on the progress that had been made at that point. And then on January 16th, the calendar committee met again to kind of have one last discussion or meeting about the entire process and the calendar recommendation. And then January 18th, we are here tonight to present to you the just the entire process. So one of the things that I'd like to go back to, and we've started with this the entire through every meeting, and that is House Bill 2610 of the one of the previous legislative sessions, change the requirement from the number of days to the number of minutes that are required. And a school district must have 75,600 minutes of operation. And a calendar must include 2 weather makeup days or the equivalent minutes, and that each day is 420 minutes at the minimum. Any early release days must be at least 4 hours or 240 minutes. Some of the education code that we were considering as we went through this whole process, a school district may not begin instruction for students prior to the 4th Monday, but because AISD is a district of innovation, that's one of the exceptions to the rules that we were allowed to have. A school district may not schedule the last day of instruction prior to May 15th. The school day must be at least 7 hours in length. It requires that a teacher be employed on a 10-month, 187-day contract. And so those are the things that we're really making sure that we considered as we went through the process. Talk a little bit about the survey now. That survey that went out to the initial group, and then we went and sent it out again to all staff employees, asking these 4 questions. Would you prefer more days for staff to work without students being present? What that looked like would be to be determined, but just in general, staff to work without students being present. Would you prefer to end the school year earlier for students? The third question asked is, are the early release days critical to the success of the campus? And then the fourth question was, if accomplishing any or all of these previous 3 required extending the school day by up to 12 minutes, would you be in favor of that? And so the next few slides are going to show about the results of those that went out. The first question, as you can see, went up to 2,900 staff members roughly responded to it, and 53% were in favor of more staff days without students, 47% was not. The second question, would you prefer to end the school year earlier for students? Same 2,925 responses, 78% said yes, 22% said no. Question 3, are the early release days critical to what you're doing at your campus? And again, 2,899 respondents, 66% said that the early release was not that critical, 34% said that it was. Excuse me. And the fourth question was, again, responding to if achieving those things required extending the school day by up to 12 minutes, are you in favor of it? And this was roughly a split, 49 to 51 saying no, 49 saying no, they're not in favor of it, 51 saying yes. And so what I want to do in these next few slides is just kind of, we broke the responses down by the different groups. And so the same 4 questions from the elementary teacher responses, and then we'll go through the different groups here. But more staff days without students, 60-40 yes for elementary teachers. Ending the school day early for students, 80-20 yes for elementary teachers. Early release, is it critical? 72% says no, 28% says yes for the elementary teachers. And then adding up to the 12 minutes to accomplish those, 56% of elementary teachers said no, 44 yes. And I won't read it as in detail here, but with the secondary teachers, the same thing, 57% says no to more staff days without students. 76% says yes to end the school year earlier for students. 44% says yes, the early release is critical. And then adding up to 12 minutes, secondary teachers were 53% in favor, 47% against. Elementary administrator responses, you can see them there, the same 4 questions and their response. Overwhelmingly, 73% yes, more staff days without students, 85 to end the school year earlier, 49 to 51 on the early release for the elementary administrators, and then the 66% versus 34 on ending the school year, adding the 12 minutes for the elementary administrators. Secondary administrators, their responses are there. And we had asked that of campus support staff, and this is anyone that's on the campus that's not a teacher or not an administrator. This is their responses there, and we didn't break that up, elementary or secondary, it's just support staff at the campus. And the next slide shows the district support staff and their responses to the questions. And so during the committee deliberations, we had a lot of rich conversation in the committee about a lot of things. Again, adding 12 minutes for one option, adding 7 minutes, just removing the early release in general, more days for staff without students present, calendars of surrounding districts, length of the school days of surrounding districts as they compare to what we do here in Arlington ISD. And so, again, we had 3 or 4 meetings with the calendar committee and a lot of rich discussion on how this would impact families, childcare, schools, parents, just in general. And we came up with that recommendation to the administration that we would bring forward the calendar that you may, you'll have a version of it here, but you'll see it a lot clearer, and I think you all have a handout. But administration would recommend this calendar that you see before you, and it is basically a calendar that replicates the current school year that we're in right now. Some key dates for that would be a teacher start date of August 13th, 2018, student start date of August 20th, Thanksgiving break, November 19th through the 23rd, winter break, December 20th through January 7th, 2019, spring break, March 11th through the 15th, and the student end date for this calendar would be June 4th. The student end date could be moved up to May 31st if we don't have to close school for inclement weather or anything else. Again, we have enough minutes built in for those inclement weather days as a result of House Bill 2610. And then regardless of that, the teacher end date would have to be June 5th because of the requirement of their 187-day contract. The rationale is for this recommendation is simple. Although there was overwhelming support for the 3 questions, there was not clear. It wasn't clear in question 4 as to whether we should add the extra minutes or not. And so we felt like it would be best to bring forward this recommendation at this time and continue to, with the same calendar committee, to continue to gather input from the community, continue to cultivate good discussion around this and give us some more time to really get it out and get some good footing behind the calendar and see what's best as we move forward. But again, we'll look forward for this same committee to work on the calendar for the 19-20 year and possibly the 2021 to put 2 years out there. But those are things that we could definitely discuss at a later time. So with that being there, I'll definitely be able to entertain any questions that you may have about the calendar or the process.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Hibbs.
Thank you, President Reich, and Mr. Hill, I want to thank you for the job that you did on this. I mean, you worked very long and hard to go back or start up with this committee, go back to the board committee, and then go back to the our committee that was looking at the calendar. We asked a lot, and I would like to thank all the members of the calendar committee. Your work, it was extraordinary, and I know that there was 3 options that were discussed, and it was I think there was some maybe disappointment that all 3 calendars didn't come to us tonight. And I want to share with you that really falls more on my feet than anybody else's, because I am the chair of the Finance and Accountability Committee. And when we looked on January 8th at the last time that we met and discussed this, the 3 options were presented to us as a committee. And when we looked at the numbers from the district-wide 2,922 responses, that division between 49 and 51 was for our internal stakeholders, saying that they were opposed for additional minutes, was one that this late in the year really eliminated the possibilities for us to be able to go forward with the option B and C. And it was at my recommendation that we brought forward option A. I know you were the person that had to go back and share this with the committee. It is not to say we didn't recognize the work that the committee was doing. It's just important that we're at the point here in January that we need to finalize this calendar. And the way to be able to finalize this calendar and ensure that we are going to be able to support the mass of our community and all of our stakeholders, the parents, our teachers, and what's best for our students, would be able to go forward with option A at this point. What I would really, and I'm happy that that it seems that we have buy-off, is that the current calendar committee, we're asking them to continue to move forward through the spring and into early fall next year, and in early fall to be able to bring us either a 1 or a 2-year calendar that we can have some real community stakeholder input from our internal stakeholders. But again, I want to share with you that it was something that it came from the committee, the Finance and Accountability or Academics Committee, that we asked to bring forward option A, because we felt that the other 2 options of extending minutes at this point would not be a viable choice, knowing that we want to be supportive of our internal stakeholders, which is our teachers, administrators, and basically district staff. With that, I will share with you that the entirety of the board was not able to be in on that decision. This is the first opportunity that we as a entirety of board are being able to review this calendar. So as much as I'm trying to educate the public with the decision that was made, I'm also sharing that with my other board members, because we're not able to have a conversation outside of this our board meeting time. So with that, I do like the option that's being brought forth in respect that we do have the opportunity to end in May if we do not use our inclement weather days. And this still allows our teachers or staffs to be able to have the monthly opportunity to have a in-service day, or in October we'll have the full week. In November we'll have the traditional December, January, winter, Christmas break, and have the holidays as we have a course of the year, but at the same time have that ability of potentially being out by the end of May. So it is my recommendation that we move forward with this calendar, but it's very important that we want to ensure the committee that had met long and hard, that we respect the work that you've done, and also ask you to continue on to be able to bring us these future calendars in which we'll have more time to be able to truly evaluate the different options. Right now, we have just come up to a deadline that I felt that we needed to move forward with.
I had a question, Mr. Hibbs. You said you support this. This is a discussion action item. Or are you wanting to make a motion or have additional discussion?
I would like. Are you live?
You shouldn't be.
Okay. Thank you for asking, President Reich. I do want the entirety of the board to be able to vet this out and have a conversation before I move forward with the recommendation or as far as a motion. So I think in fairness to my colleagues, I would like for each person to be able to interject as they see fit.
Very good. Thank you.
But I would say if it needs to come back with a motion, I'll do so.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Ms. Mays?
Thank you, President Reich. I just wanted to, first of all, say that making everyone happy is impossible. But letting everyone have a voice to be heard is very possible. And I really think that that's the true intent behind the board creating committees that are made up of our focused individuals to help in making decisions for the district. So as a huge staunch supporter of committees made up of people from the community, staff, teachers, I just want to say thank you for your service that you did serve. Thank you for your continued service to serve here in the future. And I am pushing 100% that out of this calendar committee, you're going to be given an opportunity to take the time to receive the data that you need to make your decision in a much timelier fashion than appears to have been given to you this time. So that is definitely my hope. Also, I just wanted to make sure that I also thank the teacher groups for their strong input on exactly what the information is coming from our staff, and to make sure that they have a huge input on what's going on, in addition to our parents. And I just wanted to say thank you again, and in the future, definitely hoping that we are given the right opportunities and allowing members of our committees, if there's anything that you see that we could do better in assisting, in preparing the charge, in meeting the expectations that you have, please contact any of us here on the board and let us know. Because at the end of the day, we are wanting you to have the opportunity to give us the best feedback to make sure that we're doing what's best for the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Mrs. Walton.
Thank you, President Reich. I just want to also say thank you very much to the Calendar Committee and Mr. Hill for all of your work on this, time and effort. Making school calendars is a tricky deal. Back in the day when I was a teacher leader, I served on this committee. It wasn't any easier then. And the state has made it even trickier by changing over to minutes in the last couple of years instead of just days. So it was easier back in my day than it is now. But on a positive note, I think we're headed in the right direction, honing in on how to do a perfect calendar making situation, if you will. Last year we started out just kind of without any data, and the calendar kept getting sent back to the committee. This year, we started with the data, but kind of ran out of time here. But we're going to get there, and I hope that the people that have been serving on the calendar committee right now and this year will help us do that, because you have some expertise now that will be very helpful. So thank you again, committee.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Well said. Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, President Reich and Ms. Walton. I think you said the word perfect calendar.
It might be.
Michelle, we've had a rough 2 years on the calendar, haven't we? In my 9 years, I think I've thanked the calendar committee. Oh, I said Mr. Hill. It's the echo, Mr. Hibbs. It's the echo. It's the cave. It's the auditorium we're talking in and playing in. Last year we had DOI, and we had to adjust for a district of innovation. The state legislature changes where our students are having to have 75,000 something minutes, and our teachers still have to have 187 days. We went to DOI. We adjusted calendars, moved it up with some tough roads. We then came in this year trying to find different ways to do it, and we kind of got, I would say, a little behind the 8 ball as a whole. In my 9 years, I think I've thanked every committee. I think this committee more than most, because it's the one I probably don't want to serve on if I was a regular resident or teacher or parent that's out there. I think we have to say, Mr. Hill always talk about, wow, you have this job. Way to go. It's a tough one, and I appreciate it. This committee's not wasted. I know sometimes you feel that way. I think I'm hearing the pulse of the board and pulse of everything is, we've got to be a little more ahead of the game to be able to do some of the things we're trying to get creative with on this calendar. Because I look up right now, and it's the 18th. Our next meeting's the 1st, so even if we push it out, and man, we're behind. I mean, just call a spade a spade. We're behind on where it is, on where we need to have that calendar. And then we come back with surveys, and it's 50-50 on some fluctuation. That's pretty tough to make a big, drastic change to your staff to do that. So I think we're making the right move, Mr. Hibbs, and I appreciate Mr. Hibbs taking that. I think it's a group effort, but I appreciate you, Mr. Hibbs, always wanting to step up and do that. I think this is the time, though, where we evaluate our process, right? And we look at our process, and this is a time where obviously we have some need to be creative with what we're doing on a calendar. Last year we kind of bounced around the idea of, should we create a preliminary second-year calendar so that we're already ahead of the game? Well, I think this is confirming to me that's probably something good we should consider doing. Should we have this calendar probably done in September and October of each year? Yeah, we probably could, and then you have that 2-year calendar. Now let's throw the huge obstacle in there on a 2-year calendar in January of 2019. We get to have a miserable couple of months and go to Austin a lot for our legislature to see how they're going to butcher it. But also looking at that 2-year calendar, it helps us, one of the things we're pushing for is have teachers instead of contract days to be on minutes to match students and some of those type of things that match. So having a 2-year helps us build out of where we're trying to go and helps people have an idea. Nothing's ever finalized in that second year, but if we're confirming each year, the year before, I think that really helps that, as we started talking through and as we've had the discussions, if everyone throws out, what if Dr. Wirtz, our chief academic officer, and consults the team and says we want to go to quarters? That's a crazy idea, but it's something that some districts have done, usually some smaller ones, and you could do. That's the time to start looking at that. We've got to be far enough in advance to really be fully prepared. I fully believe in the parent survey. I think we're missing it this year, and that's okay. We're behind. But I do think that needs to be built in for our next year. Ms. Hudson, I'm not taking your fire, but you mentioned earlier of tracking data on absenteeism. It's a great idea. It's an awesome idea, and I think it should be utilized. And then even get more creative. On some of these professional development days, we know teachers are working at midnight. They're doing online professional development. As our professional development becomes more and more online, I don't care when they do it. So on some of these PD days, have them come in at 11 and then they're done. They can do whatever they want for the rest of the day. Send them home, send them any which way they want to go. Who cares? If they don't, probably can't say this from the state taxpayer, if they don't work that day, awesome. It's a professional development. They're going to work. No, I don't think I've heard anyone ever question getting their value out of a teacher. If you question that, let me go. I'll give you a tour of any school to see what they're doing, and I'll sick about 1 million teachers on you to attack you for that. They're professionals. Let's treat them like professionals from when they're coming in to track through some of those things. Getting creative. I think it's the key on some of this of how do we make it easier? I think we're one of the, we have a set schedule, but we're one of the few workforces that's like, here's your times, here's your hours, here's your days. And our employees are on contracts, and it is a little different than some of the others, but I do think we have to find some of those. And if we're extending minutes, if we don't have the money to compensate, can we make it up by taking back some of those minutes on some of those days where they're only coming in a half day and doing some of those things and sending out so our minutes even out for our teachers? I think that's where we have to take the challenge and get to that. I think in every negative, and I don't want to call this a negative, but a blip in the road, good things come from that. And I commend my colleagues up here. I know it's hard when you start getting emails and you're like, what are we doing on this? How's this happening on this? And we have so many balls up in the air at one time, it is hard to keep tabs. I commend Mr. Hibbs for leading this committee, a wonderful job, and guiding this, and the staff and then the committee. It's, once again, to start it, it's one of the hardest committees to serve on because everyone's worried about their calendar and everyone wants to know. But I think we can take this as an opportunity to find a future, more advanced way to do this and change some of the process. So I thank you, Mr. Earl. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Mrs. Hudson.
Thank you, President Reich. I just want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues in thanking the committee for their hard work. This has been a grind. I mean, I think I share frustration with a lot of the people that have reached out to me that there's a lot of work and we still ended up back in the same place. And I get that that's really frustrating. But that work is not in vain. It's just going to be used at a later time. And I think it's very important for us. These surveys are really key. I think it's wonderful that we do these. And I think it's very important to tell the folks who do work for the district that didn't respond to those surveys that these surveys really matter. They're being listened to, and it's important to participate. So if you can encourage your colleagues to check their email and respond to these surveys, I think that sort of participation is just as important and just as valid, but a lot easier than the work that our committee has done. I think it's very important to make sure that we're all on the same page when we move forward. One of Ms. Walton's best analogies is, let's not have the train leave the station and leave a bunch of, teachers sort of bloodied along the side of the road and we're motoring along without them. So I think, it was a mental image that stuck with me, Ms. Walton. So I think this is an opportunity for us to get more input, build more consensus, and do so much better next year. Not to say that we've done terribly this year. This calendar is not harming children. It's just really very difficult to reconcile when the state gives you minutes for children and days for the teachers, and to make sure that everybody is happy. One thing that I did want to call out in looking at the surveys and listening to the elementary school teachers and administrators that I've talked to, what I got from them and from the survey is that there's a lot of concern at the elementary school for the students. Everybody thinks that a longer summer is great, but what do we do with that extra time that the kids are spending in school? I know a lot of times there's a huge divide between when a kid has breakfast and a kid has lunch, or when a kid has lunch and then it's the end of the school day. And I think nobody thinks that elementary school kids, particularly the youngest of them, are gonna, you don't wanna make them just grind it out for another 15 minutes. What benefit is that to the student? So what I'm hearing from the folks that I know that work in elementary is that they wanna make sure if we do end up adding minutes, but that it's beneficial to our students. What are we doing with those minutes? And I think taking an extra year to consider that and to get input and just sort of figure that out. How are we going to make this useful to our students? Because at the end of the day, we want to make our teachers happy, we want to make our parents happy, but it's got to serve the students. So this is also an opportunity to get ahead of the game for the coming years and to never be this far behind again. Because if we have 2019 in September, maybe we can forecast the following year. And so maybe this is just an opportunity to learn how to do better going forward. So thank you again to the calendar committee. There is, having served on those committees and then having attended a lot of different committees, there's nothing more frustrating than giving so much of your time and then feeling like maybe it didn't go anywhere. I just want to reassure everybody that it is going somewhere. It's just not going somewhere as quickly as we wanted because we want everybody on board. So thank you for just allowing me to speak, and thank you for your hard work.
Thank you, Mrs. Hudson. Good points. I know Mr. Hill kind of made a nod to the audience. Members of the calendar committee, could you please rise so we can recognize you? Thank you for your time and your energies and truly your passion in putting that you've put into this. As you've heard from around the dais here, it's encouraging to me to know that your work is going to continue. I hope that each of you choose to continue on with the committee because you've got all that knowledge that you've invested to learn, and that will be very impactful when we're looking at going forward, whether it's 2-year projection, changing minutes, that type of thing. So thank you very much for your work. Just a couple of points for me, and Mrs. Hudson, you said it at the end of your remarks. This is all about the students. This is an instructional calendar, and year in and year out, this calendar discussion has always been quite colorful. It's always been, I think, more over time, push-pull, can't please everybody, and sometimes I felt that the student kind of got lost in the conversation, and we are absolutely focused on the student success, and that is what's most important. So with that said, our teachers are the instructional professionals in our district, and we will likely have community input. The education process for that community to provide that input is, to me, a little bit challenging and tricky because they're not the instructional specialists. We as a board are not the instructional specialists, it's those teachers. So I really value their input into this process. As far as weighting, that might be something to consider for the calendar moving forward, the committee moving forward. What I also want to say is that this year, there is more input and more analysis over this than there ever has been before. And I'm proud to be here with my colleagues. I'm proud of our district for doing this. It was not like that at the very beginning when I first got on this board, and just like many other things in the district. And to see this conversation become more analytical, more intelligent, and really student-centered and focused it's wonderful. Good work. So yes, bumps in the road, as there will continue to be, not with this, but not just this, but other issues as we continue to grow and blossom for our students in the district. So the final thing I just want to highlight, so with this proposed calendar, if we don't have weather makeup days, we're out May 31st.
That's correct.
Okay. And the students are out. Sorry, teachers, that's that whole contract thing. But we've got a legislative session ahead in 19. We'll see what happens. And for this year, we're basically in that same situation where we will be out. It's a day, so it'll be June 1st that we would be out if we don't have any weather makeup days.
I haven't looked at the calendar, but there are 2 days that we have built in, enough minutes for 2 days, and so if we don't use those minutes or days, then we would have the opportunity to release early.
Right, for the students, for the students. So same thing, and I'm sure the students as well as our teachers and parents will be waiting to hear whenever that announcement is made. I know we've got some weather months to get through before you can make that the earliest determination that you can to announce that out to the community. But that's a great thing. Let's see, I have a couple of more trustees wishing to speak. Whoop, I just turned you off, Mr. Hibbs. Let me put you back on.
I'm just looking to make the motion.
Okay.
Unless Mr. Chapel.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
President Reich, I would like to go ahead and make a motion that we move forward with the 2018-19 calendar as as presented by the administration.
Very good. Oh, and Ms. Walton?
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So a motion by Mr. Hibbs, a second by Ms. Walton. I don't see any other lights. No, I don't. It disappeared. Did you? Okay.
I just was going to make an observation that it's on.
You got to turn mine on.
So you're okay? All right. Mr. Chapa will survive. Let the minutes note. Okay, this technology. Okay, there we go. All right, so we have the motion and second on the floor, no further lights or notifications indicating further discussion. As soon as it appears, there we go, please vote. Motion carries. We have a calendar. All right, thank you again, committee. Really appreciate it. So 2018-19 is no longer draft. All right. Let's see, moving on. The next discussion action item is letter B, consider approval of the 2017-18 internal audit plan. And let's see, I would think Mrs. Mays, would that go to you?
Sure, I'll take it.
Okay. There you go. Whoop. Try again. There you go, Ms. Mays. Yes.
Oh, I'm on. Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to our internal audit subcommittee, Kristen and Justin. Thank you for serving. Thank you for allowing me to chair a subcommittee that is near and dear to my heart. It's auditing. Our annual audit plan, I'm going to ask Mr. Tim Edwards to please come up, our internal auditor. And while he's coming up, I want to make sure that I also say thank you to his staff, Alexis Palacio, Chris Denman, Emily Arditi, and Frank Cortez, who is our intern. I just want to thank them all for the work that they do for this district. I also want to thank Tim, who's not required, I'm sorry, Mr. Edwards, who's not required to attend these meetings from start to finish, does every single meeting, and I really appreciate that dedication. So please.
President Reich, board members, Dr. Cavazos, since all of you have at one time or another served on the board audit committee, I think I can be brief tonight. I'm going to devote just one slide to reviewing the audit plan methodology, and then an additional 3 slides to the specific audits that we're asking you to approve tonight. As you'll recall, there are approximately 80 broad categories in the audit universe that are included in our risk matrix. These are all the departments, functions, and processes that can be audited. And then additionally, there are several hundred subcategories that are categorized and can be extracted to define the scope of individual audits. With respect to identifying risk factors, there are 5 risk factors that we use to develop our plan. First, financial and budget risk. Then we have management and control and operations, compliance and public interest risk, internal and external audit history, and strategic risks. In assigning values, we make about 400 entries into our risk matrix based on both objective and subjective assessments of the risk factors as they apply to each item in the audit universe. The weighted score for each auditable item by design yields a list of those entries that are sorted from highest to lowest when you combine the probability of an adverse event with the impact that such an event could have. And then finally, we calculate available resources, that is, available audit hours, and match those resources to the identified audit needs of the district. That is the process that we follow. In following that process, that I just described, this slide and the next 2 list the audits and activities that we're asking you to approve. First, we have 2 projects that we didn't complete last year that deal with expenditure of bond funds in the security and fine arts areas. We will be completing those this year. Then next, we try to audit activity funds at the high schools on a 2 to 3 year cycle, at the junior highs on a 3 to 4 year basis, and at the elementary schools approximately once every 5 years. The allocation of hours that you see on this year's plan is appropriate in completing this 2 to 5 year goal. And then inclusion of inventory test counts in the plan is one way that internal audit contributes effort toward the annual financial audit. That is, our external auditors depend on the work that we do, and as a result, the amount that we pay the external audit is, for the external audit is reduced. Another assistance that internal audit provides toward completion of the annual financial audit is by providing assurance that Schedule E of the CAFR can be relied upon. Schedule E is the schedule of agency funds, and our audit protocols consist of reviewing all banking records and bank reconciliations, validating receipt and expenditure totals, and confirming accurate accounting records contained in all of the district's 79 activity funds. Then, as you well know, internal audit manages the fraud, waste, and abuse reporting system. We receive, evaluate, and then either allocate to other investigative entities or perform our own investigations for every report that is received. The hours allocated to this function this year represents an approximate 1.5% increase from last year, and this increase is based on historical data and anticipated activity at this point of the year. On follow-up reviews, they are a necessary element of every recommendation that internal audit makes to at the end of any audit, and is required by professional auditing standards. As you can see, we've allocated 300 hours to these activities for the year. Development of the risk assessment and annual plan, such as what we're discussing right now, takes about 150 hours on an annual basis. The next line is the allocation for contingencies, such as special requests from the board, audit requests from district management, and or special projects that internal audit performs and is based on historical data. The last 2 items on this slide are for an outsourced financial review that is underway related to construction expenditures, and for a technical risk assessment of our information technology function that will assist us in identifying the scope of future technology audits. The hours noted here are for internal audits preparation, coordination, communication, and reporting time. The last slide lists the audits identified primarily through the risk assessment process, and they comprise approximately 31% of the total hours available for the year. Without going into extensive detail about the scope of each of these audits, I'll just comment on each one. The audit of the career and technical education expenditures will be based on the financial aspects of this growing district initiative. The next line item, PEIMS attendance, is an extension to an audit completed 2 years ago. At that time, internal audit evaluated the central office PEIMS operations, reporting, and compliance. The particular audit on this plan will focus at the school level regarding tracking, record keeping, and compliance with district policies and state law. 2 audits on the list, grounds maintenance operations and garage maintenance operations, will have us looking primarily at the financial, compliance, effectiveness, and efficiencies in these areas of plant maintenance and the transportation department. The audit labeled Purchasing EDGAR Compliance will evaluate district initiatives related to guidelines contained in the Education Department General Administrative Regulations. And last, we're planning an audit related to paid transportation expenditures, which, in addition to the financial and contractual aspects, will cover compliance, effectiveness, and the efficiency of this function. And that briefly outlines the audit plan. I'll be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you very much for that information. And we do have Ms. Mays.
So none of my colleagues have anything to say. I was just going to make a motion. So if you want to say something first.
We do have some.
Okay.
No? No. Go right ahead. You're just going to make a second. Yeah, we'll have to work this out.
Okay. Okay. Well, once again, Tim, thank you very much for the work that you do in making sure our standards throughout the district are met or created if necessary. Thank you very much for help save money in places that people don't think that we could save money, and you're finding that. Thank you for making your annual plan. And I also really appreciate your discussion on your risk assessment and allowing us to have at least a voice or a thought into how you continue that process and continue to make sure that every year as we go into a new fiscal year, as legislative changes come into play, as money goes up, money goes down, that we are continuing to keep our risk assessment along with that fluidity. Really appreciate that. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we accept Mr. Edwards' audit report.
We have a motion to accept the audit report by Mrs. Mays and a second by oh, did it again. Hold on. I'm ignoring that comment. Go ahead.
Thank you, President Reich. I wanted to echo what Ms. Mays said. I'm extremely proud to serve on this committee with Ms. Mays and Mr. Chapa and getting to work with Mr. Edwards. I believe Ms. Mays said it earlier. By law, we are not required to have an internal audit. And one of the things that we're most proud of in this district is our fiscal responsibility and the fact that we take every opportunity to be responsible with our taxpayers' dollars. And a big part of that is trust but verify. And that is a big role to serve, and you do it very well. And I've been very proud to serve on this committee. So with that, I will second.
Very good. So we have a motion and a second, and I want to clarify the motion. You stated the internal audit report, but you did mean the internal audit plan as stated on the agenda, correct?
Well, excuse me.
Well, you have to turn yours off.
Say yes for me, please.
Well, just
you got to turn this off.
You can't cover it. That doesn't do it.
My jokes aren't so funny now.
Okay.
If everybody can hear me, my answer is yes.
Perfect. All right. Seeing no other notifications indicating further discussion, please vote when we're able to. There we go. Okay, we have the approval of the internal audit plan. Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much. Great work. Okay, next item on the agenda is the items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. And I'd ask to pull item H, consider proposed lease extension for cell tower operated by AT&T.
Okay, item H. Very good. Don't see any others, so we will move on then with the consent portion listed on the agenda, less item H. Ms. Powell, please share information, bids, et cetera.
President Rice, board members, Dr. Cavazos, we have 3 bids on the agenda for your consideration this evening. In all 3 cases, administration is recommending the lowest bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district. In terms of our donations, the donations presented for your consideration this evening total $106,023, and that brings our year-to-date total to $455,249.
Excellent, thank you. Do I have a motion to accept the consent? Ms. Hudson? Oh, disappeared.
Exception.
With the exception of letter H. Yes. And Ms. Mays? Oh, disappeared. Okay.
I was just gonna make a motion, but it's been made.
Seconded.
So, oh, second. Second.
Okay. Rock, paper, scissors. All right. I don't see any other notifications of discussion. When it's available, please vote to approve consent less H. And passes unanimously. Okay. On to separate consideration, Mr. Hogg, letter H.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Reich. I've pulled letter HB as I need to abstain as I do a lot of work with AT&T, so I'm abstaining from this vote.
Oh, very good. Well, gotta check. Hold on, Mark. We gotta go back. There we go. Okay, buoy is off. Mr. Hibbs?
Thank you, President Reich. I would like to...
It turned off again. I don't know why. There we go.
Okay. Thank you, President Reich. I would like to move that we approve letter H on the consent agenda.
Thank you. And Ms. Hudson?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Hibbs, a second by Mrs. Hudson to approve item H on the lease extension of the cell tower operated by AT&T. No further lights, no further indications for discussion. Please vote. Okay, motion is 1 abstention. Motion carries with 2 noes. Thank you. Okay. Now we move on to discussion items. We have 1 item for discussion this evening, the TASB board policy update. And let's see, Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Rice. And this evening, we'd like to bring our TASB Board Policy 109 update for, it's really a discussion item. The Governance Committee has met several times to discuss this, and we've gone through it, asked TASB some clarifying questions and things like that. So, Mr. Hill, would you give us an overview of Update 109?
Yes, so Dr. Cavazos said this is Update 109 presentation for discussion, and we'll take you through a few slides here. Again, background, Update 109 addresses several recent changes to both state and federal law, including some amendments to the Texas Administrative Code. Just a reminder, you don't know this, the legal updates, it's the law. We don't have much, can't make any changes to it. The local policies need board action to adopt, revise, or repeal the local policies. Review processes that appropriate staff, including the Board Governance Committee and our General Counsel, has reviewed these legal and local policies changes. The district also discussed some of the recommendations with TASB, with our policy consultant down there. Internal staff has looked at the policies and continue to work through how the changes may impact our daily work, and we'll continue to work to process that all the way down throughout the system. Update 109 has 125 policies, 108 legal policies, and 17 local policies that are included in this update. There they are. It's a bunch of them. It's in your packet that you have, and you can see them a lot closer there on your screens. So look at closer look at some of the policy revisions that are here in Update 109. Excuse me. Policy BBE local deals with the timeline for administration to fulfill requests by the board members. It's a change in that policy or adjustment. Policy CK local and emergency plan just states that the district's emergency operations plan must include procedures for addressing reasonable security measures when the district's facilities are used for polling places. Policy CO local dealing with meal charges addresses procedures for students with insufficient balances on their meal accounts, and our district's internal staff that's already an administrative regulation that we have in place already. Policy DH local employee standards. The district holds all employees accountable to the Educators Code of Ethics. That's just a policy that says that all employees, not just the certified employees, are held to that standard. Local policy changes continued. FEA deals with armed services, and it talks about if students who are 17 or older are excused for up to 4 days per year if they're related, absences up to 4 days per year if those absences are related to pursuing enlistment in any branch of the U.S. Armed Forces or the National Guard. Policy GKE local, community relations, procedures for representatives of a patriotic society to speak with students during a regular school day about the membership in that society. And so it just puts parameters around what we can and what we can't allow, and the time limits and when and that. And so it really firms that up for us. Some of the legal policy changes that, again, just more of information because we don't have we can't make changes to the legal policy. AF legal deals with District of Innovation, requires that the districts post those innovation plans on the district website in a prominent place, and that's something that we already do. DH legal employee standards, a person is ineligible for a retirement annuity if from TRS if that person is convicted of a qualifying felony. District with knowledge must report this to TRS. FFAA legal with wellness says that notice to parents of elementary students who have lice. Again, that's a standard that we already have. They're just making it law now. The nurse must notify those parents in writing or electronically. FFI legal deals with student welfare, expansion of bullying to include cyberbullying, anonymous reporting of bullying, and parent notification of bullying. Again, we've gone through all of these with the Board Governance Committee, and we have a follow-up meeting prior to our next board meeting to bring these back for approval. And so our next steps would be to continue to review these legal and local policies with the appropriate staff and the board, and to make sure that we understand how it's going to impact our work, and then again to bring this back for consideration at a future board meeting to come. With that, we'll entertain any questions that you may have about Update 109.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Hill. Mr. Hogg. Oh, hold on. Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, President Reich. I want to first thank Mr. Hill on behalf of the committee. I chair the governance committee with Mr. Chapa and Ms. Walton, and 109 was a big one.
Yes, it was.
We knew it was a problem when we had multiple meetings scheduled right when it comes out. That's when you know an update's it's going to take a little more effort than the others. So I thank you, Mr. Hill, especially as we had a follow-up to go back to TASB. And just so, as everyone knows, TASB helps funnel through some of these legal updates, because this is always a big one this time of the year when it comes out, because this is still kind of cleaning up everything from the legislative session that ended in 2017, some of the changes that have to come into place, and TEA's finally figured them out of what they're actually going to do with these legislators pass laws, and TEA that has to figure out how they actually work and how to interpret them as actual laws, and then TASB has to help us and actually interpret them into actual policies to help districts put them in place. So this was a big update. I think our committee for all this ranges from, as you've seen, everything from wellness, which is very important, lice notification, bullying, cleaning up some rules on concealed carry of teachers that have them in cars and are traveling, and some of those things. It covers the broad spectrum of, I don't want to say everything you can think of, because right when I say it, there's something else you're going to think of that's not on here, but I do think this is a very broad update. We spent a fair amount of time. Ms. Walton can show the book, and I'm glad I do most everything electronically, so I don't have to carry that around with me. It does take a long time to scroll through it, but this is an update, and we can answer any questions of our colleagues that have. And I know as y'all review this more, y'all been reviewing it, as you review it more over the next week or two before we vote, feel free to send any questions, and we can get answers to you before the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Appreciate it. Oh, you have to turn your mic off, I think. Thank you. Mr. Chapa.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a few general comments about Policy Update 109. This is my first time going through the process, and a few things that stood out to me going through the, I believe it was 867 pages of policy updates that we have been blessed with by the Texas legislature this year. And, you know, it looks like on one of your slides, you know, a lot of these changes are things that are beyond our control. We've got 108 legal policy changes and only 17 local ones. And we had to make some conforming changes to the local ones. But just my general observation is that it seems somewhat anomalous to me that in a state where presumably we have many members of the legislature who believe that the government that governs best is the government closest to the people. And time again, as I was going through this policy update, I saw a continual erosion of the local control that we have as school districts over our ability to affect change and to make policies, and whether that's through a restriction of our ability to do certain things, or it's not quite an unfunded mandate, but a command that we have to create certain policies and then follow through and monitor those policies. There were several of those where we were commanded to create a policy for X, Y, or Z that we now have to follow through on, that creates a compliance burden on our district and on your staff. There were a lot of policy updates that to me created more questions than they provided answers. I'm looking at GKE Local Community Relations, procedures for representatives of a patriotic society to speak with students during regular school hours about membership in the society. Is that a mandatory command for us to allow that to happen? Do we have to take instructional time now away from our teachers and students for anyone who purports to be a patriotic society? What is a patriotic society? Would we be engaging in viewpoint discrimination if we don't consider a certain organization a patriotic society that thinks that they are, but we let the American Legion maybe come in and speak to our students? And so it continually, as I was going through these, I feel for my fellow board members and school districts across the state of having to, Mr. Hogg made a reference to who knows what will happen in January 2019. And so this was my first time going through it, and I can tell you as a rookie to this process, I was unpleasantly surprised to see the burden that our state government put on local school districts in this state.
Welcome, Mr. Chapa. Thank you. Mrs. Hudson.
Thank you, President Reich. I do have a few questions, if you don't mind. On policy CKC local, there is the board shall review its investment policy and investment strategies not less than annually, and shall document its review in writing, which shall include whether any changes were made to either the investment policy or investment strategies. I wanted to know what's the mechanism by which we trigger this and ensure that we are compliant? Are we adding it to the handbook? Is there a separate document? I know from previous policy updates there are a number of mandated annual reviews. And so I was going to ask, when you answer about how we make sure that we trigger this and stay compliant, is there a way that we can do a review and make sure that other policies that mandate this periodic review, whether it's annual or whatever, that we can have some kind of document that we're, making sure that we are compliant to Mr. Chapa's point. That's it for this one. It's just a question on how will we make sure that we're compliant? What's the mechanism by which we're doing this? If we just want to make a note of that and then come back, I don't know.
Well, I can definitely address it now, or I can do it in more detail after we've had a chance to look at the specific policy, whichever one you prefer.
Yeah, if you want to take a look at it, that's just fine with me.
Okay.
My next question is on local policy CNA, and that is regarding hazardous traffic conditions in high-risk areas. Does this policy now trigger us to review all of our walking paths to schools and identify ones that may be hazardous?
What that policy does, and it says if you are to request or apply for funding from the state for those routes that are less than 2 miles that you consider hazardous, then you have to go through this process. If we don't request the funding for it, then we can just, as a district, make that determination and go from there.
Okay. I would like to know how this policy impacts us if we're going to elect to do a review and see if there are students who are living within that 2 miles that would be better served by us applying for that. I know that the transportation allotment doesn't actually cover the cost of transportation, but nevertheless, having an opportunity to keep our students safer if they are having hazardous routes, which I know a lot of community members have brought to me different areas that they feel are hazardous. Even if we just get a little bit back, that's better than nothing, and it is serving the students better, so just that. On policy CO local, this is we're, I guess, being required to create a policy for what happens when a student has a zero balance on their meal allowance. And I wondered what the discussion was that led us to the 2 days.
So that's a recommendation from TASB, what you see in there. Our internal operations, even prior to this, we let students charge. And we don't take food from them. If they don't have it, they get a meal. It many times goes beyond that 2 days. This is just a recommendation that TASB says.
So I guess my concern with that is having visited with our food and nutrition services and hearing from them that we do serve our students. And if it is longer than 2 days, then they are not going to be, hungry. Are we then going to be holding ourselves to this policy? Do we need to reevaluate the 2 days recommendation? I just think some discussion around that and how that impacts, because obviously that's in conflict with our current, just sort of the way that we do business and the way that we serve our students. And I would be concerned about the potential of either asking people to violate our policy to feed students or having hungry students. Yeah.
That is a local policy.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's up to us.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Hence my concern about
yeah,
the 2
so, and I
days.
think that's what Mr. Hill is saying, is that it's a TASB recommendation, but it's incumbent upon us to assert what we believe is the right policy based on our value system. So I would fully expect that would be something that the committee would look at and amend. Let me see if I can do it. Oh, you have to turn yours off. Yeah, we'll have to work on this. Okay, go ahead.
And Dr. Reich, Ms. Walton and I were just talking, I thought we'd talked about that, and Mr. Hill will refresh, and I think a little more research is needed, because we did talk about this, and our current practice is 2 days is what food services do. Now, we don't turn anyone away if they take food, but the insufficient funds is a 2-day practice that food service is currently doing now. If I remember correctly, and it's been a process, I would say some more.
We can definitely look at it more.
Yeah.
I think it's not in policy, but it's our.
It's a practice, so the procedure kind of that's being currently done in the district, and it's been, food service said has been successful. Yes. Now, if a student does get food, they're still not taken away, so that's a little different discussion of what happens on that. But the 2 days of insufficient, they're behind, they still give them the meal, and then there's also an alternative meal after those 2 days, I think is where it flows after that. So it's a current practice that they say they're currently meeting and standard going with now, and it works, and I think that's why we left it at that 2-day mark.
Okay. And back to Ms. Hudson. Thank you.
I mean, from what I'm understanding, reading the policy, it seems like that is a 2-day grace period. I guess maybe if we could just not necessarily here, but have a little more insight into what Food and Nutrition's current practice is, and if this actually changes the practice. I think after 2 days, we do start contacting the parents and trying to get them to fill out you know, the application for free and reduced lunch, et cetera. I think it triggers a certain set of, if I understood correctly, triggers a certain set of events, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the child is turned away or hungry. So I just would like to make sure that.
What practices?
Yes, exactly.
We'll definitely find that out.
Okay. So I did take a look at, for all of these policies, some of our surrounding districts and their practices. And I did want to bring up on DH Local, the employee standards of conduct. There are districts that within this policy address workplace bullying and financial impropriety. And I would just like to ask that the governance committee take a look at that and see if those are options that we would benefit from having in our policy and addressing directly, or if that's not necessarily a problem. Gosh, I hate the sound of this turning paper right here next to the mic. I am so sorry. I think I might be done. Okay, and I did want to talk about FFF local. And this is about educator misconduct. I don't see anything in there about grooming, the practice of grooming a student, which is sort of, well, everybody knows what grooming is. I really don't want to go into it. But I'm wondering if that's addressed perhaps in another policy and unnecessary here, or if it's something that we want to add in there, because that sort of comes before what's listed here, and I think it might be prudent to address that. Another note on GKC local, community relations and visitors. A lot of other districts do put in their local policy just a header that sort of says visitors are welcomed at all campuses, because this is sort of detailing the restrictions and the rules that govern that. But I do want to make sure that no one feels like, as a parent, that they're not welcome at the school. It's just a matter of, you know, following certain guidelines. So maybe something to consider there. And that's all that I have. Thank you so much for your work on this. It's huge. When I came in today, my chair was a little bit too low, and I was sort of looking over the podium like this, and I thought, well, maybe I could just sit on Policy Update 109, and that would just boost me up just enough to look as tall as everybody else. It is, it's huge. I completely agree with Mr. Chapa's point that I just don't even know how they think that the district can actually digest that amount and implement that amount, and it comes with no additional funding to be able to do that. I definitely appreciate the hard work and definitely appreciate getting my questions and concerns answered. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Ms. Hudson. Ms. Walton.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. I too echo what Mr. Chapa and Mrs. Hudson have said about the minutia and how tall the weeds get at some point. And as an example of that, CV Legal Facilities Construction. Now you'd think that would be pretty straightforward, but supposedly, and I just wondered my question is, have we gotten a list from the comptroller of companies known to have contracts with or provided service or supplies to a foreign terrorist organization? I'm serious. It's right here. You know, it's like our facilities people and our construction people don't have enough to deal with by just making sure we're getting, you know, a good product for our money and for the taxpayer money. But now we've got to have the list, I guess. So that's a rhetorical question. Thank you for all you do and for weeding through all of this. It's crazy.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Mr. Hogg.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Don't worry, Ms. Walton and Mr. Chop and Ms. Hudson, you'll become jaded like me on the legislature after 9 years. So now you understand why I take a dig at them every chance I get up here. I mean, motivation for them to do better. That's what I meant. One real quick thing, and Mr. Choppy, you brought it up, and it made me think about it. Right now, I think we're currently at $83 million or so in unfunded mandates. Anytime we do these updates, especially this 109 right after a session, Mr. Hill, can we just, on that, we can look at it right now, I would think on that Excel file, and this is going to Ms. Powell over there also, we probably need to just kind of star anything that we think could have potential unfunded mandate implications with us, just so we make sure we're adding it to the list. You know, I think and not all unfunded mandates are bad mandates. I think we always have to make that very clear. They're still all unfunded mandates, which is a key factor on there. So I think it'd just be helpful as we do this policy and we're fresh going through it, anything we think could be an unfunded mandate on any policy that's changed, it's going to cause us more money, more reporting time, more implementations. I think just note it to make sure we can add it to our preliminary list, and then we can look up numbers as we start getting a little closer, if that's a fair recommendation.
I think so.
Looking at Ms. Powell, she's shaking her head, and you are too. So that's the only thing I have.
And just a follow-up question for that information. Do you have a requested time period for that? Do you want it in relation to this update or just preparing for the session? Yeah, here we go. Okay, go ahead.
You should set it where we can just turn our mics on at any time, Dr. Reich, then chaos consumes. I don't think there's a timeline. I just think as we're fresh on these updates, the more we can add it to the list to go back and check when we look at those unfunded mandates and Ms. Powell goes back and checks, because as I do think Ms. Powell catches almost everything we do and her staff.
Yep.
There's a lot of policy updates in there, and if there's anything in this policy update we think could potentially be an unfunded mandate, I want to make sure we are listing every single thing possible that they are not providing funding for that could be an unfunded mandate. So there's no official timeline. I think some we know, hey, it's a simple report. Yeah, it's an unfunded mandate of, one person, one day. Okay, probably not list that one. But if you think there's something on there that's going to increase our security cost, it's going to increase any of our costs, I do want to make sure we're tracking those. So no official timeline on there.
Very good. I think it's a great recommendation moving forward into the next legislative session. It'll be nice to be able to articulate last legislative session with our policy updates. This is what it cost,
And our
potentially.
legislators want to know.
I wish you could just talk.
Don't worry about it. Our legislators want to know what the unfunded, they asked for that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, great. Ms. Hudson again? Okay, hold on. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Just to piggyback on what Mr. Hogg was saying, I would be curious to know the calculation of administrative time spent on these policies and having to implement them and review them. I don't know that we could add that, but there's a cost there. Yeah, it's big. And how much time is being taken away from the business of the district and things that serve the students. And like you said, not everything that's mandated is necessarily bad, but certainly underfunded. So thanks.
Very good. Okay, I don't see any other indications for further discussion, so this is a discussion item only. Look forward to it coming back on our future agenda. Thank you very much for the information. Okay, we now move to open forum for non-agenda items. I don't see any cards. We will move forward with Superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Rice, and I'd like to share some information about our district. Current information here. Piercy Elementary and Principal Cody Van Duzy were inspired by the book Wonder, and they worked with the City of Arlington Kindness Initiative to do a Day of Kindness breakfast at Piercy. It came with donated boxes of Cheerios, Crest toothpaste for our shelters, etc. And our mayor was there, but several board members were able to join us. The students were so inspiring in their kindness initiative. So I want to thank Piercy Elementary, the principal, leadership there, also the teachers and staff for making that happen. Next, our Arlington Retired School Employee Association luncheon was in December. And as you can look at that picture, we had a full house there at the PDC. It was a chance to share information about our district. They're always a wonderful group to provide not only great questions, but good feedback about the things that are happening in the district. So I thank them for continuing to support and being involved in our district as retired employees. The new cafeteria at Sam Houston High School opened in December, providing a larger dining space for students, and that's some of our wonderful cafeteria staff. It was a beautiful space that is just appropriate in the size and the service to our students there at Sam Houston High School. And I just want to thank everybody. It's not something that just comes together. It takes a lot of people, staff, in particular our food service staff, to make sure it actually comes to fruition. And I want to thank everybody there at Sam Houston High School, a great cafeteria space there. Congratulations to Clarissa Cruz from Piercy, Kanisha Mullen from Carter Junior High, Jessica Wilson from Arlington High, and Janine Young from our Health Services at Young Junior High for being named Teachers and Department Employee of the Month for December. And you see them there. We interrupted the welding class there at the Career Tech Center, but she was very gracious and went right back to work after we recognized her, which is good. The students were very, very proud of her for that. We're also able to surprise and recognize our January Teachers of the Month, including Beatrice Davis from Reminzi, Casey Cagle from Young Junior High, Michelle Heath from Seguin High School, and Erica Alvarez from our operations staff and custodial staff there at Gunn Junior High. Great work, great staff. These are just a small sample of the wonderful staff that we have, teachers and employees across this district. And finally, you heard even tonight some of the MLK singing that took place. We had a wonderful weekend for MLK, Advancing the Dream celebration. Showcased really beginning on Friday all the way through Monday of our students and our community. Great partnership, great committee that's already been mentioned for MLK celebration in Arlington that's really unique and provides a lot of opportunities for our students to really reflect on the legacy of Martin Luther King. And also there, as was noted earlier, Michael Hill was honored as our Advancing the Dream Award for Education. So congratulations, Michael. You already came down once, so we won't make you come down again, but congratulations for that. We're very, very proud of you and proud of all our students and staff that helped with MLK. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Are there any trustees with reports? Ms. Mays?
Thank you, Dr. Reich. First of all, I want to say congratulations to Sam Houston High School Principal Fernando Benavidez for being recipients for the $10,000 from the Texas Rangers Foundation for them to use for batting cages. Had an opportunity to see that baseball check being handed over today, and that's very exciting for Sam Houston High School and for the students there. Yes, and the alumni. Thank you to the alumni who's very, very active there at Sam Houston. Also, when I woke up last week to hear about the freezing and single-digit temperatures, I looked at my husband, and my first thought was, what about our homeless population? And that brought to mind that I just want to publicly thank Tori Sisk and her staff in the Student Outreach Service for taking care and for being concerned for the welfare of our homeless students population, whether it's clothing, whether it's assisting in a place to stay that's warm. Just really want to say thank you to that outreach of people, in addition to the Arlington Life Shelter for opening up their doors when the temperatures fall and getting in as many families, parents and students and children as they can. Just thank you for that within the community. And then lastly, the MLK celebration over the weekend was amazing. And our students in Arlington had an opportunity to show off their dancing, their writing, their art, an opportunity to receive scholarships, and just how fun that is. Also just want to send a shout out to the Divine Nine, the Greek sororities and fraternities that assisted all weekend long and for being visible. And my last comment is just to say that celebrating Dr. King is not just about not just remembering the dream of Dr. King, but it's also participating in advancing that dream. And as we've said all weekend, love, peace, and justice.
Well said. Well said. Mr. Chapa.
Yeah, I just want to take a point of personal privilege and make a mea culpa publicly. I made the mistake last month of supporting my alma mater against Mr. Hibbs's alma mater. And I just wanted to put on the record that you know, the cost of doing that is the TCU bow tie that you see me wearing today. I have not worn a bow tie since my wedding, and I just wanted to put that on the record so I may maintain at least some semblance of dignity. Thank you.
Wedding worked out well for you.
Mr. Hibbs.
I wasn't going to respond at all, but I will tell you, you are a man of great honor and of your word, and I appreciate that. And when you're finished with that TCU bow tie, you just pass it my way, and I'll gladly wear it.
It will be available immediately after.
Excellent. I think it looks good on you, Mr. Chapa, but I understand alma maters. Okay. Let's see. I do want to make a note. We've kind of chuckled and said some things about the technology. I do want to sincerely thank Mark Murray and all of the folks that did everything, Chad Branham, his staff, putting together all the technology in this room. It's excellent. Obviously, we've got our things to work out, which we knew, but please don't take any of our bantering up here as anything as a negative. We really appreciate it. This is going to be great going forward. So thank you for that. With that, Madam Secretary, do we have any items to consider? And I have to let you have the mic. There you go.
Yes, sir, President Reich. Bowie has requested 3 to 5 year trend from the TAPR report of the operating expenditures for all funds. And also for Ms. Powell to, on the spreadsheet, to create a mark or something indicating for the policy updates that could potentially be unfunded as an unfunded mandate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. All right, it is 10:28 p.m. And we will not be going into closed session. I consider this meeting adjourned.